IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Monday, January 27th. The offseason is kind of officially here started now, Trevor. We've gotten through the portal window. We've gotten through the season. We're now a week past the national championship game, which Notre Dame played in and lost Ohio State to cap off what was just an outstanding 2024 season. Didn't end the way that I know that we and I'm sure Notre Dame would have liked to have ended, but it was a heck of a season for Notre Dame, and now we're in the offseason, and boy, what an offseason it has been so far. I'm sorry. I'll try to be better on catching those coughs, but they're coming a little bit more just suddenly now. So my apologies, but it's been a pretty wild offseason, Trevor. We're gonna have a lot to talk about. Obviously, Notre Dame's had some portal losses since we last got together. That we've had some, so Chad Bowden left, which we'll talk about today. Obviously, Notre Dame is still in search of a defensive coordinator. We believe we know who that's going to be, so we'll talk about all that. Notre Dame had a big recruiting weekend this past weekend. Things went very well. I had an intel piece on that yesterday on the message board. So a lot of good stuff from that. Some very talented players on campus this weekend. So we'll do that. So but I wanted to kind of also go over what the offseason is going to look like. So starting next Monday, we're going to start sort of our normal routine, and it'll kind of start this week, but with everything that kind of happened, this is kind of where it's going to go. And some of this actually is, Trev, you and I have talked about, but it's somewhat finalized. So for you as well. But so on Monday, we talked about doing the show that Sean Davis and I have done in the past, sort of the RTCF show. And it's just really hard to do that on the weekends consistently with just life going on and things like that. So what we decided to do is we're going to do that on Monday. And so, we'll do sort of our RTCF show on Mondays. And, obviously we'll talk about recruiting, team, and then a college football topic. So Sean and I will do that on Mondays. Trevor and I are then going to go live on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I need to give Trevor one day a week where he can focus on getting writing done and getting work done and those type of things. And also Trevor's going to start being more involved with recruiting, which obviously our recruiting coverage is going to ramp up here with those things. And so that will be kind of our Monday show. And then Trevor will fill in for Sean and I at times on that Monday. And then Tuesday to Friday, Trevor and I will go live with shows. Wednesday, we're going to get back to the Bisel Hold. So each day we'll kind of have like a little rundown, a midweek rundown of topics that are pertinent, and then dive into the Bisel Hold every Wednesday. So Salty, there's your cue. You can go ahead and get the Bisel Hold thing up on the board now. And then also on Friday, we're going to obviously have the Friday free-for-all mailbag. And so then on obviously Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, different days, we'll have different topics that we'll discuss. We'll break down aspects of the team. Tomorrow, for example, Trevor and I are going to dive into, we're going to take a sort of a look of building into the offseason. And the first topic that we'll kind of get into tomorrow is going to be, look, can Notre Dame build on its 2024 success? And then what are some of the things that, looking forward to 2025 about what our expectations are for Notre Dame in 2025. And so we'll dive into that. Wednesday we'll kind of do a portal overview on Wednesday as our midweek rundown, and we'll talk about what was lost, what that means for Notre Dame, what they've added, what that means for Notre Dame, and then Bisel Hold 2020. Or on Thursday, Trevor and I will kind of take our first big picture look at the Notre Dame offense for 2025. We'll talk about the top players that need to be replaced. Some of the things that'll look a little bit different. We'll kind of dive into areas where we think the offense needs to improve, areas where we're confident they will, areas where, some things have got to get proven. And then, of course, we'll do that. And then Friday midweek mailbag, or for the Friday mailbag. But we're going to do one other thing. So at the end of every segment, like we'll finish our couple segments today. We've got, 2 segments today. And it's kind of 2 segments, but it's broken into different parts of 2 segments. When we're done, we're going to do an hour mailbag. So I know we used to do this all the time where we would do mailbags at the end of every show. We're not going to do them the way that we did because we just can't do 4 or 5 hour shows every day. It's too much. But what we are going to do is at the end of each segment, we'll do an hour-long mailbag. We're going to go an hour. And the way that it's going to work, so we'll do this on Monday, we'll do this on Tuesday, we'll do this on Thursday. And obviously Friday's a mailbag all day. The only day we won't have any type of mailbag is Wednesday, but of course that's buy, sell, hold. And that's one of the reasons you need to be on the message board, because you can get those in there on the message board. And so we are going to bring back the daily mailbag, which I know you guys loved, but we're going to do a little bit differently. We've got to keep it in an hour. And there may be times where if we got some super chats that go over, we'll do that. Super chats obviously get moved to the top of the line, but that's kind of our overview. And then, of course, if there's ever any breaking news, we'll adjust our topics for that day and handle the breaking news. And, we may do some weekend shows from time to time if some topics come up. We're obviously going to focus a lot on Notre Dame team stuff, but we are going to look, Trevor and I have been really planning out how are we going to get to this, but we want to do like a lot of, looking at the college football landscape as well. And we'll each day we'll have some days where we'll have segments where we'll talk about Notre Dame's opponents, or like Trev and I have talked about. What did we say we're going to do this next week, Trev? The top 25.
Yep.
To our own way too early top 25. Which everybody does. Trev and I will it's going to be fun because we're going to both do our own individual top 25, and then we're going to bring it together and do AP top 25 point system to come up with the IB top 25. But then when we get to the top 10, we'll kind of then go, okay, here's the IB top 10, but here's where Trev had it, here's where I had it, and have some fun talking about that. So we'll do that next week also. That's going to be fun. And then we'll just kind of have different off-season college football topics that we're going to discuss as well, and we'll put those videos on the CFB Nation show. And then there will be some times where Trev and I may go live on a weekend or at night on the CFB Nation channel and just talk about a college football topic. So we'll have some of that as well. So it's going to be a fun offseason. I'm excited about it. Some of these changes that we're doing, we're also shifting more of message board only content that we're going to start producing, and we'll have some more on that as we get closer to releasing some of those things. So I'm excited about it, Trevor. But of course, today we got a whole lot to talk about today, man. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Notre Dame team, obviously recruiting, and we're going to dive into it all. But I wanted to just kind of let everybody know where we were to start off with.
Yeah, I'm like some of the people in the chat, and Bryan, you and I have been talking a lot about what the schedule is going to be for us this offseason. It was funny. Lauren and I were at the dinner table the other night, and I was talking about how offseason's a little bit busier in a different way than what in-season was, right? Because you get in your rhythm of, all right, Tuesday we got this show covering this opponent. Wednesday you have these articles coming out, right? And now you have a bunch of different avenues that we have to talk about in the offseason. Makes it really, really fun. And then obviously we also have stuff about the basketball teams coming out. I know Sean Stiers is doing his thing with the women's team, and I'm taking over the reins and diving into Notre Dame's men's season as well. So there's going to be a lot of awesome content coming out from Irish Breakdown. Notre Dame's men's basketball team got some work to do, a little bit of elbow grease they got to put in to turn around their season, but they got some good pieces back. The team's as healthy as they have been since the start of the season. So I'm excited to jump into everything with you, Bryan. Like you said, it's been a week into the offseason, 7 calendar days since Notre Dame played Ohio State in the national championship. And it feels like the offseason's already been going on for a month with how busy everything has been between the departures and the transfer portal and some additions and junior day. And so there's a lot, man. There's a lot to jump into.
And it seems as though there's been a lot of negativity about it, which I understand. And obviously with coaches leaving, some of it we expected. You had starters leaving, some of which we expected. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday, the portal stuff on Wednesday. And then, obviously some angst about, how are they going to replace those hires? And so it just seems like, and some of it to me is as we kind of kick it off, Trevor, with the losses, I'm not actually upset about Notre Dame losing any of the people that they lost. And not from the standpoint of they didn't do a great job. And that's a frustration of mine, is that, see all these people, Chad wasn't very good at what he did anyway. And Mickens is, Golden is, it's Freeman's defense. Like, okay, they both did a great job. They both played a huge role in where Notre Dame got to. Like I was having a debate with the guys like, well, the recruiting rankings weren't that good anyway. They ranked so-and-so. And I was like, did you watch games this year? Like, because the vast majority of the players that played for Notre Dame this year were guys that Chad Bowden and his staff recruited. And my stance is, I am bummed that Al Golden and Chad Bowden both left. They're losses. But I also don't believe anybody on this staff is irreplaceable. And if I were to rank the most irreplaceable people, like they're not number one. They're in the top group, but they're not like number one. And so the thing is, you have to have a little bit of, hey, this is college football. When you are good, people are going to want to take your people. And then you just need your head coach to be able to say, okay, well, we lost this guy. I have a plan in place to move on and make some adjustments and make some changes and evolve and make good hires. And that's the task that's in front of Marcus Freeman now. So I don't look at departures the way that a lot of people do, as long as the departures are for good reasons. And when I look at Chad Bowden's departure, I look at it as like, look, the guy got a huge pay raise. And I don't know that I would necessarily have advocated for matching that, to be completely honest with you, and which we'll get into later. Al Golden left to become a defensive coordinator in the NFL. I can't fault him for that. I mean, he did a great job at Notre Dame. And this was always kind of the thing that was the concern, is if he was going to leave, it was going to be for something like this. Like when people like, he may go to Penn State. I was like, he ain't going to Penn State. Oh, I hear Al Golden's looking at Clemson. He's not going to Clemson. If Al Golden leaves Notre Dame, it's going to be for the NFL. And that's what happened. But look, why? Why did the NFL want Al Golden? Because he had great defenses the last 2 years, right? So a great foundation has been laid by these two coaches. They both did great jobs, and now it's up to Marcus Freeman to replace them. Just like Ryan Day, the national champion Buckeyes, has to replace Jim Knowles, and then Penn State had to replace Tom Allen. And if you have good people and you win, people are going to want to take your people. And that's just that's the nature of it. The key to success is just reloading every year. And that's going to be the key. And we're going to find out if Coach Freeman can do that. So that's kind of what today's show is going to be about, Trevor, is really diving into, what we're hearing about what's going on. And the first one is the D coordinator. Obviously, Al Golden leaving, did some great job last 2 years. And I want to make sure that we're setting the record straight here, because I have some strong opinions about who we're hearing is going to be the next defensive coordinator. And a common refrain is that I've seen, or common response from people is, well, you didn't like the Al Golden hire either. And look how that turned out. And I have stated before, I wasn't high on the Al Golden hire. But don't confuse the two things, because I have written evidence of things that I put out back before Al Golden was hired and when he was hired, saying, I think he's a great coach. I think he's smart. I think he brings a lot of value. There's a lot of positives, but I'm concerned about the fact that he hasn't been a coordinator in almost 20 years, and the fact he's been in the NFL for so long. Can he relate to college players? That was the concern with Al Golden. It was not, gee, I don't know if he could be good. So if you're going to point to something that I said, at least be accurate with what I said. I never said Al Golden was a bad hire. And as a matter of fact, Trevor, I want to make sure, because this record needs to be straight when people are going to push back on comments that I'm going to make here coming up here in a little bit. People are pushing back on the notion that, that I didn't like the Al Golden hire. And so this, any criticism I may have of this hire doesn't mean the same thing. And I just want to push back on that, because it's not accurate. And as I said, I want to make sure that the record is straight on that. So I'm going to pull up what I did say, and this is a direct quote of what I did say about Al Golden when he was hired. So before Al Golden was hired, I made this comment. I said, there are a lot of concerns. There aren't a lot of concerns or drawbacks for Golden. He's a veteran coach with a reputation for being a good teacher and recruiter. There's one major question, however, and that is the fact he hasn't actually called a defense. He hasn't called a defense or coordinated a defense since 2005. Then I went through the people he hired. I said having Freeman and Washington on staff would help Golden with the transition back to the college game, but the fact he hasn't served in this role in almost 2 decades has to be viewed as a legitimate concern. That's what I said. And then I also said that Marcus Freeman nailed his first coaching staff, which Al Golden was a part of. So my concerns about Al Golden are much different than my concerns about this next one. So I want to make sure that people understand it, because I'll definitely admit that I was concerned about that hire. And I actually liked Joe Rossi better, because I knew that Joe Rossi could do. Joe Rossi to me was more of the known. But as I also said at the time, I had a lot of respect for Al Golden as a person and as a coach, because I actually had some interactions with Al Golden when I was coaching, and always found him to be a very decent, approachable, good guy that was willing to talk ball and didn't have that I'm too good for everybody type of mentality, which a lot of people have. So I want to make sure that people understand when I've said in the past that I was didn't like the hire, that we understand what I didn't like about the hire. So I just want to make sure that that's clear before we dive into this, so that way we're all on the same page. But the fact is this, Trevor, before we get into the candidate, this is a huge hire for Marcus Freeman. Anytime you're replacing a coordinator, it's a big hire. And Marcus Freeman's hiring of coordinators has been a little bit up and down so far. But he's only had to make one hire on defense as coordinator, and that was a home run. Right? I mean, Al Golden was flat out a home run. There's been some questionable hires on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, Tommy Rees was one that was kind of thrust on him. I tend to like Tommy a lot more than others as a coach and the job he did. And, obviously the Jared Parker one was a risk. I understood the reasons why. I think you had to make that move at that time because you had gotten turned down by multiple coaches up to that point in time. But I understood the hire, but it was very risky. Didn't pan out well. Then he goes out this last offseason and makes a home run hire. And if he didn't make that home run hire, the guy that he was going to replace Jared Parker with, if he didn't get Denbrock, in my opinion, would have also been a home run. And that is Kirby Moore at Missouri, who I think is an outstanding young offensive coordinator. He's Kellen Moore's older brother. So that would have been a very good hire as well. So there's been some good and there's been some bad with Marcus Freeman's coordinators hires, which you know who else has had that? Every single head coach that's ever made a hire has had good hires and bad hires. We've talked about this before. Nick Saban has made some bad hires at Alabama and some very, very excellent hires. Urban Meyer did the same thing as at Ohio State. He hired Ryan Day turned out to be a really good hire. Tom Herman turned out to be a good hire. Chris Ash turned out to be a solid hire there. Everett Withers, not so much. Alex Grinch, not so much. Right. So there's been a lot of different, ups and downs, and every coach goes through that. I think Kirby Smart made a brilliant hire when he hired Todd Monken. I think the Mike Bobo hire has not been as good. Right. So just keep that in mind when you go through these things and saying that a coach that I may think is making a mistake on a certain hire doesn't mean that, we don't have faith in the coach and all these other type of things. And I also don't think that we as fans who support Marcus Freeman and believe Marcus Freeman is doing a lot of great things in Notre Dame doesn't mean we're members of a cult that have to blindly follow and support every decision he makes. The one thing that I'll say before we begin all of this stuff is whenever I am critical of a player or a coach, I hope that I'm wrong and that it ends up being a great hire. I had skepticism about Al Golden for specific reasons. He answered those questions. First year, those questions were very valid. Then he adapted and did a phenomenal job the last two seasons. Right? And so that's what I'm hoping, that whatever decision Marcus Freeman makes, I hope it's works out just as well, if not better, than the Al Golden hire. But what we're hearing, Trevor, is that after looking at guys like Jim Leonard and Joe Rossi and Jim Knowles, although I don't know how serious the Jim Knowles stuff was, I think that was more, from what I've been told, that was more Jim Knowles' agent reaching out to Notre Dame to create a little bit of a bidding war as opposed to him wanting to come to Notre Dame. So I don't know how serious that one was. But from the sound of it, based on what was reported last night by John Bryce at Football Scoop, who I have a lot of respect for when it comes to this type of stuff. He does a pretty good job on being in the know on these type of things. And I believe Pete Sampson also reported that he had heard this as well, is that the hire is going to be Chris Ash, former defensive coordinator at Texas, Ohio State, and Arkansas, and Wisconsin. Also has been a head coach at Rutgers. That was not a very good tenure. However, I don't really care what he did as a head coach. We will spend less than 20 seconds talking about his tenure at Rutgers, and it'll simply just be to mention that he was a head coach at Rutgers for 4 years. Because I've said a million times, Trevor, just because you're a good position coach doesn't mean you're going to be a good coordinator, and vice versa. And just because you're a bad head coach doesn't mean you're a bad coordinator, because you had to have done something in your previous roles before you became head coach to get a head coaching job, right? So I don't care. And also he walked into I don't care how good or bad of a coach he walked into a situation where they were dealing with NCAA sanctions. So I don't really care about what he did at Rutgers. I'm going to focus more on what he's done as a defensive coordinator, and that's going to be more of where our discussion is. So sounds like, barring a change of course, a change of heart, there being some issue in the background check, it sounds like Chris Ash is going to be the next defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So, Trev, let's just kind of go a little bit into, and if you don't mind kicking this off, just kind of running through his coaching history as we get into this. So I think you said you have that up. So let's dive into his coaching history and just kind of take a peek at how Chris Ash got to the point where he is on the verge of becoming the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and taking over what I think is one of the 5 best coaching jobs in the country if you are a defensive coordinator, when you consider the talent that Notre Dame has and just the recent track record of success for defensive coordinators. I mean, Brian Kelly's last 3 defensive coordinator hires are now the head coach at Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman's only defensive coordinator hire is now the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's a pretty attractive job, I would think, that is now apparently going to go to Chris Ash.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk around Chris Ash and what he's going to be able to do for this Notre Dame defense, which has had a streak of illustrious hires, right? And so for his coaching career, Brian, you mentioned some of it, and most notably, he was a defensive coordinator at Wisconsin from 2011 to 2012. He spent a year with Arkansas as their defensive coordinator in 2013. And then he was co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State in 2014.
But he ran the defense. I mean,
Yep.
That's the thing is, and that's relevant to the Notre Dame stuff too, because guys, titles don't matter. And there's he's going to be co-coordinator with Mickens. What matters is who's running the defense. And Chris Ash ran the defense at Ohio State in 2014, and he will be running the defense at Notre Dame if, in fact, he takes the job.
So he was defensive coordinator at Ohio State from 2014 to 2015. If you guys remember, obviously, Ohio State won the national championship in the 2014 season. That was the first year of the 4-team college football playoff. After that, he was hired as Rutgers head coach from 2016 to 2019, where, like Brian said, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Tenure there wasn't great. 1-8-32 as a head coach, 3-26 in the Big Ten, but they were dealing with a lot of sanctions. And again,
they were new to the Big Ten as well, somewhat new to the Big Ten.
Yep. So it's just one of those where it doesn't really have much weight in being a defensive coordinator, right? Al Golden was not a super successful head coach.
They're not hiring to be their head coach.
Right.
That's, yeah.
And then after that, in 2020, he was the defensive coordinator at Texas. Now, there's 2 different trains of thought here. Sometimes people will throw out the stats from 2020 because it was such a crazy year. Sometimes people really include them. I think the thing that I find funny is I think it just depends on the success of the teams, right? I don't know a whole lot of Notre Dame fans that want to throw out stats from 2020 because they went undefeated and made the playoffs. But depending on the team that you talk about, it's
what is your thoughts on 2020, Trev? Because my thought is you have to take it with an asterisk because it was a different type of offseason, especially for coaches who were new, because you lost all the install periods in the spring. Like Notre Dame had like 1 spring practice and then it was canceled.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it doesn't, you don't ignore it. You don't negate it. You don't say it doesn't matter, but you do have to, I think, look at it and say, okay, what's the context of the success or lack thereof for that coach? And with Chris Ash, I'm a little bit willing to give him a pass to a degree on the Texas failure because they were terrible on defense at Texas because it was his first year and they didn't have an offseason to install what he wanted to do. But that's how I look at it. But I don't think you can ignore it and be like it doesn't matter, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that, how that should be viewed?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think you said it perfectly, man. It's that you always have to look at it with a little bit of context because it all can't be for naught, right? Because on one hand, you can't say, well, if a coach had a bad season, if a player had a bad season, it was COVID, they didn't have enough time for install. Some of that is true, But you also have to deal with the task at hand, because if we're just going to completely throw out the 2020 season, then Devontae Smith didn't win the Heisman in 2020, and Alabama didn't win the national championship in 2020. So I'm in the in between, same as you. You have to look at it with context, but you still have to look at it, right? So that's where I'm at. After he was the defensive coordinator, after Chris Ash was the defensive coordinator at Texas, he went and he was the defensive backs coach for the Las Vegas Raiders from 22 to 2023. And as of right now, he is, and I don't know if he is still there. Sounds like probably not, but he was a pro scout for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024. And which brings us to right now, where he is going through the interview process at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and my understanding is, as of last night, that he was offered the job. I just don't know if he's going to take it yet, or if he's able to take it yet, because you can say, hey, listen, we're going to offer you the job pending, background checks or whatever the case may be, is my understanding. And I don't know that Notre Dame necessarily wanted this to get out just yet for that reason, but we'll kind of see how it plays out. So let's kind of look a little bit of his track record, Trevor, and I'll just be honest up front. I'm not a fan of this hire at all. And I don't think Chris Ash is a bad football coach. I just don't think he's a really, really good football coach. He's a solid football coach who's had solid success, but I have some issues with it, and I'll explain to you why. Number one, the job he's done at different places has just been sort of good. It hasn't been great. You look at his two defenses at Wisconsin, they ranked 13th and 17th in college football in scoring defense, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But they ranked 20. He inherited a scoring defense that ranked 25th the year before and ranked in the top 10, I believe, the year after he left. His two Wisconsin defenses ranked 15th each year in yards per game. He inherited a defense that ranked 20th in yards per game. And his second defense actually gave up more yards than the defense he inherited. Rushing defense took a step down. They were 60th in his first year and 24th his second year. They were 26th this first year. So they took a step back in year one, and then the next year were a lot better. You look at third down defense. He inherited a defense that ranked 68th the year before he arrived. They went to 50th his first year and then jumped to 17th in his second year. That's the one area where you saw a big jump in effectiveness under Chris Ash. And then you look at red zone defense. They ranked 77th in his first year in red zone defense, but they were 98th the year before he got hired. And then they were dead last 120th the next year. That's nuts, though. 2012, you rank 120th and you're dead last in college football. Now, if you rank 120th, there's double-digit teams below you. I think that's crazy.
That's wild.
By the way, turnovers, they ranked 33rd in his first year, then 105th in turnovers in his second year. Then you go at Arkansas and you look at what they did at Arkansas. They actually got worse in scoring defense, worse in total defense, worse in yards per play, worse in rushing yards, worse in passing yards, which is an anomaly because normally in other stops, his pass defense tends to get a lot better. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Worse in third down defense, slightly better in red zone defense, 19th to 17th, and then worse in turnover margin. Ohio State, his first year, they were pretty much what they were the year before. His second year, they were a lot better. They ranked in the top 5 in total defense or scoring defense. I think they were second in scoring defense his second year, Trev. They were 9th in total defense. They weren't elite in either pass or rush defense, but they were really good at both, which is why they ranked top 10. So it's interesting. They didn't rank in the top 10 in either rushing or pass defense, but they ranked in the top 25 in both. And then you add them together, they ranked 9th in total defense, 22nd in rush defense, 16th in pass defense. They did rank 9th in yards per attempt. And I think that's a better reflection of how good their defense was that year. Part of the reason they ranked 16th in passing defense is because they had a lot of big convincing wins that year, late in the year especially. I mean, they won the Big Ten title game 59-0 over Wisconsin. So when you have big leads, teams are going to throw the ball more. So I think that 9th in yards per attempt is a little bit more up my alley. The concern, again, is they ranked 56th in interceptions. with a defense that had like Von Bell. It had, I think Marshawn Latimer was a backup on that defense. You had Eli Apple on that defense. That was an absolutely loaded defense in 2015. And so, yeah, it's great that they had good stats in 2015. But, again, when I look at it, Trevor, it's kind of like you had Von Bell, you had Tyvis Powell, you had Jerry Conley, first-round pick, Eli Apple, first-round pick. On the D-line, you had Joey Bosa, who's a first-round pick. You had Sam Hubbard. You had Adolphus Washington. Your linebackers are Darren Lee, who I think was a first-round pick. Josh Perry was a third-round pick. Raekwon McMullen was your leading tackler. Like, that was an absolutely loaded football team and did what you're supposed to do. They only had one loss that year in the regular season. Wasn't because of their defense. I think they lost like 17-16 because to Michigan State, if you remember, at home. Defense was very good that year. In 2014, defense was kind of just solid. That first season they had some games where they were good and some games where they weren't so good. That year they won because they had an elite run game late in the year and with Ezekiel Elliott. And they had some games where, you look at Alabama, they gave up 35 points. I actually think they gave up 20 points to Oregon in the title game, but I thought they did a really nice job against Marcus Mariota in that defense. I thought that was one of the better jobs that he did. Gave up 28 points to Michigan, 27 to Indiana, 25 to Minnesota, 37 to Michigan State, 24 to Penn State, 24 to Maryland, 28 to Cincinnati, and then 35 in a home loss to Virginia Tech. They had a couple great games. The Wisconsin Big Ten title game, they shut out Wisconsin, was obviously really good. And then they shut out Kent State early in the year. Those are the only two games all season they held opponents to single digits with the same players basically that they had in 2015. So when you look at his success, that 2015 season is the anomaly in results. But that's also one that you have to look at and say, but that defense is probably going to be closer in talent to what he's going to inherit at Notre Dame than what he had at Arkansas or Wisconsin or Texas. That's, where you're at. But when I look at overall the track record, Ryan, about Chris Ash, Trev, is I don't see anything special. I don't see a coach that significantly upgraded the results that he inherited. I don't see a coach that did things that were wow, when this guy came in, look at how much better they got. And when you look at like when Mike Elko took over at different places, Bowling Green, Wake Forest, in different places, they always got significantly better on defense. That's the reality of it. And they just haven't done that here. They haven't done that. And so the reality is that, I have a hard time looking at this, and I'll get into some other aspects that concern me later. Is when you look at the hire, is Chris Ash a bad football coach? No, because he's never coached a bad defense except for 1 year at Texas. And as we've said, he inherited a bad defense, didn't have an offseason to turn things around because they literally did not have an offseason, right? And that was so like, to me, there's two anomalies in his track record. Texas 2020 and Ohio State 2015. Everything else has just been kind of good, top 25-ish type of defense. I guess you could say Arkansas in 2013 also. But again, he inherited a terrible defense. But that's the thing, though. It's like it's up and down. And when you look at other coaches that Notre Dame has hired recently that have had experience, there was always significant improvement from when they took over. Obviously, you look at what Al Golden did at Virginia when he took over. You look at the job he did turning around Temple. They got a lot better in a hurry and got better on defense. And then obviously Notre Dame did the same thing. He inherited a pretty good defense in 2021, and he made it elite. And this defense statistically last 2 years was better than anything that Clark Lee, Marcus Freeman, or Mike Elko did. And the only defense Notre Dame has had in the last 30 years that could match what this defense did the last 2 years was the 2012 defense. And so that's kind of my issue here is we don't need that guy in the chat anymore. Goodbye. So That's my concern, Trevor, is you don't see anything special about him outside of 1 year at Ohio State with let's go count the let's go look at the draft. Okay, let's go ahead and look at that Ohio State team in 2015, and let's go talk about who they had on that team. So they had Joey Bosa was a first-round pick. Eli Apple was a first-round pick. Darren Lee was a first-round pick. Marshawn Latimer was a first-round pick. Malik Hooker was a first-round pick. By the way, Latimer and Hooker were backups on that team. Jerrion Conley was a first-round pick. You had on that team also, you had Von Bell was a second-round pick. Adolphus Washington was a third-round pick. Joshua Perry was a fourth-round pick. Raekwon McMillan was a second-round pick. You had let's see here. Sam Hubbard was a third-round pick on that team. Tyquan Lewis was a second-round pick. Like, that team was loaded. And oh, by the way, they had Ezekiel Elliott and Michael Thomas and guys like that on offense. So that team was loaded on defense. Will Notre Dame have that kind of talent on defense? Maybe, but it's not necessarily there now. But will Notre Dame have talent that's better than what he had at Wisconsin and Arkansas and Texas? Yes. Yes. And so that's kind of the thing is there's nothing in the track record that tells me this guy has a history of going to places and turning defenses around. But what he also doesn't have, and this is the silver lining, is none of his defenses got worse than what they were before either. So like at Wisconsin, he inherited a pretty good defense and kept it a pretty good defense. You know, at Ohio State, he took over a good defense and made it a slightly better. Hopefully that's going to be the case at Notre Dame as well. But again, I'm trying to be as, you know, here's the good, here's the bad as I can. But you just kind of think for a hire at Notre Dame, you just think there's a guy that's going to just kind of knock your socks off with the work that he's done at previous places.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this potential hire, and it sounds like it's all but a done deal until the ink is on paper, right? And so for me, I have a lot of different opinions on it, right? And you point to some of the facts that you had. To me, the way that I look at it is that he had, you can't discredit, right? Like at Ohio State when he was at Wisconsin, and I'm all for that, right? I understand that. But to me, the mark of a good coordinator, especially when like Marcus Freeman's whole mantra is about elevating and making this program better and things like that, is you brought in a guy who like isn't known for like elevating. You know what I'm saying? Like you go back through and you look at what like a Bryant Haynes did at Indiana. You're not going to convince me that Brian Haynes didn't have or had more talent on that defense than, you know, a Texas defense. Right. Like like that's just something that I think that would be hard to convince me of. I know that they had, you know, the one corner, D'Angelo Pons, and they had Mikel Kamara. CJ West was a pretty good player, but like you're not going to convince me that they can't. The Texas players in 2020 can't hold a flame to those guys.
To the Indiana kids, right? But again, the Indiana coaches had that whole offseason.
Right. Sure.
To get that group going, and he didn't have that.
Right.
You know?
Right. And then you look at the time that he spent with Ohio State, and to me, when I walk away and think of the mark of a good coordinator, and this isn't Chris Ash specific, this is just in general how I feel about coordinators. The mark of a really good or a great coordinator to me isn't being successful with NFL caliber talent, right? Like that, when you have the talent that 2015 Ohio State defense had, like the expectation is you have a good defense, right? And so that's kind of my thoughts on him, right? Like it's just where I look at it, and the reason why it's so frustrating to me is maybe not frustrating, but the reason why I question it so much is Notre Dame, from a talent perspective, for the players that they have on defense, is slowly closing the gap. And I think that the defensive side of the football is closer to closing the gap than the offensive side of the football. Some conversations that we're going to have later throughout the offseason, which is why, going back to the first point that you brought up, Brian, that's why it is so important, right, that this defensive coordinator hire is a big splash.
Yeah.
And Coach Ash is not a big splash, in my opinion.
Yeah. See, here's my thoughts on that. I don't think it has to be a big splash. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. If you do, that's totally fine. Make that point. I'm good with it. That's not what I'm saying though. What I mean is like I don't care about the perception of it, because as long as Marcus Freeman is the head coach, recruiting on defense isn't going to be affected unless the product takes a step back. What I'm saying is it needs to be a big hire with the results. The results have to be good. And I could sit here and I'm being very reserved in my critiques of this hire right now, because I'm trying to be, look, here's the facts, here's the data. My opinion is this could end up being a really bad hire in certain ways. But at the end of the day, if the results are good, I don't care. Like, I don't think he's a very good recruiter. As a matter of fact, I think he's a below average recruiter. And I don't care what Urban Meyer said about him. Head coach is what's a head coach going to say about a guy he hired? He's a terrible recruiter. I care about the results. So you can tell me all you want. He's good at this. He's good at that. What were the results? What do people in the coaching profession feel about him? If I could send you all the texts that I got from last night from the people in the coaching profession, there's nobody that's being honest and doesn't have an agenda that's going to tell you, yeah, he's a very good recruiter. Yeah, he's a good people person. Yeah, the other coaches are going to love him. I'm not hearing any of that stuff. And I know the reputation he's had. Those are my concerns. But if the product on the field is good, then that stuff won't matter as much, because then it'll be like, hey, look, as long as the results keep going the way that they need to go, then you've got Marcus Freeman to recruit, and hopefully hires a good GM to recruit. My concern is, will the product on the field stay good? Now, my thought is this: you'd have to hire a complete bum for the defense to take a step back in 2025. And I don't think Chris Ash is that. Meaning, you're walking into a pretty established situation. You're walking into a situation where you've got a lot of talent. Marcus Freeman needs to do whatever he can to keep Mike Mickens and Max Bulla especially on staff, especially Mike Mickens, because that is the best defensive coach and defensive backs coach in America. My concern is Chris Ash is the DB coach. How's that going to work? Is Chris Ash just going to be the D coordinator and then let everybody else kind of coach their positions the way they have? That's a question about, and that's a question anytime, like, how is Al Golden going to work with Max Bulla? That ended up working out awesome, because since that was his position, it's always a question mark, no matter who you hire. When you hire a defensive coordinator, that coach has a specialty position that somebody on staff already has. You have to kind of look at that, right? And you look at somebody in the chat said, well, let him coach safeties. So what you're saying is you're expecting Mike Mickens to take a demotion, essentially, to bring in Chris Ash. Because people say, well, what if Mike Mickens is the co-defensive coordinator? I don't know if it's true or not that Mike Mickens is offered the co-defensive coordinator. John Bryce is reporting that that's true. So if John's reporting that, I got to give it credence, because John does a really good job of that stuff. But what I have been told is that if it is a co-coordinator role, it does not change his role at all. And any good coach knows, unless I'm just looking for a pay raise, I care more about my role than the co-coordinator thing. So Mike Mickens is going to go from pass game coordinator and coaching the entire secondary to co-defensive coordinator, which is the same thing he did last year. And now he's only going to coach corners. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you have to be careful if you're Marcus Freeman, is how do you handle this meshing of it? And I'm not saying it will or won't be successful. I'm saying that's what Coach Freeman has to juggle. So this isn't a criticism or saying it's a mistake. It's simply saying that's sort of the waters that Marcus Freeman's wading through to make it work, because making the staff work together is going to be the key, right? You have to make sure that the staff can work together. And so that's kind of the conversations you're going to have about how you make it work to where everybody's on the same page and moving forward. That's going to be a key to this working or not. You know what I mean? And so, but as long as the staff stays somewhat together, especially, like I said, Mickens and Bulla, and the talent appears that it's going to stay, barring guys leaving after the spring. I don't know why they would do that. It's certainly possible. He's going to inherit a really talented roster, a very deep roster. And it's just about, just don't screw it up, don't mess it up in year one. And that we've seen him do. Right? Like that we've seen him do. That we've seen him at the very least get moderate improvement in most categories in his first year. Well, you don't need to have moderate improvement at Notre Dame. You just have to don't take a step back. That's the difference between kind of the expectations here and the expectations he had at maybe like at Wisconsin and Ohio State. I don't count Arkansas. Like that is not a similar situation because that was a new staff replacing a fired staff. That's different than at Wisconsin where he was replacing a guy that was a good coordinator and the team was having success. He steps in at Ohio State. You know, Everett Withers was let go the year before. He didn't do a very good job. But when you look at it, it's they were still like, what, 13-1 the year before?
Yeah.
Right? And went to the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, 13-2. They were still a really good team. It's just don't take a step back. And he didn't take a step back in Ohio State. He didn't take a step back at Wisconsin. And that's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, the question marks that I have, again, like I already stated, like it's just an interesting conversation. It's something that this is a personal thing for me. It's just something that I'm going to have to get used to adjusting to, right? And I toe the line between, you know, being a part of the crowd that trusts Freeman and whatever decision he makes is gold, and giving my own analysis of what I believe of the Chris Ash hire, right? Because to some extent, I understand the Freeman talk. I do. But for me, it's just it's going to be a tough adjustment going from Notre Dame's defensive coordinator being like the strength of the team and he's an elite coordinator to having a guy at the helm now where it's just like, hey, please don't just mess up. Which he, to your point, Brian, like he has a track record of not doing, but it's the thing that concerns me is there are pieces on the defense, like we're going to talk about through the rest of the offseason, that are question marks, like who's going to be next to a Don Schuler in the secondary because you don't have Xavier Watts. What's the interior of the defensive line going to look like? You don't have the leadership of Jack Kaiser anymore. So there are still questions that, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if he is elected to be the defensive coordinator, what that's going to look like. But if in year one, if the expectation is don't mess it up, it would take.
Well, that would have been my, just so we're clear, that would have been my expectation for anybody. I mean, if they brought in Jim Leonard or Joe Rossi, two guys that I'm high on, I'd have been like, dude, don't screw it up, right? Like, don't be so dead set on doing your thing that you take them back away from what they've been doing. Just so we're clear on where I'm coming from that, what I mean by that.
Sure. I just think that asking like a Leonard or a Rossi not messing it up is just different than asking a Chris Ash not to mess it up. Like that's the way that I look at it, if I'm being 100% honest. But again, I mean, we'll see. Cause like, again, nothing is like official yet, but it sounds like it all but is. But for me, those are some of the reservations that I have. But his track record proves that he's not a total bum, right? Like I also don't want to paint this picture that they just hired an Indiana 5A high school defensive coordinator to come in and take over at Notre Dame either, right? So,
and like, this is not a Brian Van Gorder hire.
Sure.
Like, okay. My concern is that what I know of his reputation of how he interacts with people, I can understand why people would compare him to Brian Van Gorder. That's a concern. I don't know if he's been humbled by his going from national championship coach to head coach to like you're a position coach on a crap NFL team and now you're just a scout on an NFL team. You're not, maybe there's been some humility there.
Sure.
I don't know. But the reality is Brian Van Gorder had coached at two schools prior to Notre Dame where they had like literally the worst defenses in school history. Like this isn't like, this is not that. Right. So I know that anytime they hire a guy that people are like, oh, it's not a good hire, that's automatically where we go is Brian Van Gorder. I just want to make sure that we're clear. This is not that, in my opinion, as far as his ability to coordinate a defense. The other thing too, and just so we're clear, what I'm talking about with Brian Van Gorder, Not two defenses. I'm sorry. Notre Dame was the second defense, but he had been the Auburn defensive coordinator 2 years before, and they had the worst defense in school history, and they were 2 years removed from a national championship. He'd been in the NFL for a while. He was with the Colts for a while. He was with the Jaguars. I mean, prior to the 1 year in 2012 with Auburn, he hadn't been a defensive coordinator since 2004 at Georgia. So it'd been a decade since. Chris Ash is not that. And he did, again, the Texas defense was not good at all, but I don't know that I view it the same way as the job that Brian Van Gorder did, because the circumstances are very different. And, when you look at the Auburn team in 2011, they were pretty bad. They stayed pretty bad. And, the next year they went to the title game and their defense wasn't a whole lot better than what it was before. They just scored a lot of points in 2013. But this is not that. This is not that kind of defense. My concern, however, though, Trev, is even when I look at some of the good years he had, like at Wisconsin, for example, and even in Ohio State in 2014, one of my issues with John Tenuta when he was hired was, look at all the top 25 defenses he had. That's what I kept hearing. Look at all the top 25 defenses. And, but when you looked at the stats, you'd see they'd beat up on a lot of bad teams and then get kind of ripped up by some good teams. And there's a little bit of that in his track record at Wisconsin, and even to a degree in Ohio State his first year. And that's a little bit concerning, So like they ranked, 15th in scoring defense at Wisconsin in 2011. But if you look at it, they gave up 37 and 39 points in 2 games against Michigan State. They gave up, 45 points and over 600 yards in the Rose Bowl against Oregon. And they gave up over 30 points and gave up over almost 300 rushing yards to an Ohio State team that in 2011 went 6-7. So that's a little bit of a concern that I have there to keep an eye on. But again, the Wisconsin talent is going to be a little different than the Notre Dame talent. And then the other question I have is, do they change their coverage structure at Notre Dame? Because what he has done in the past is not the same as what they do now. And that goes back to what is the role that Mike Mickens is going to have in this defense. Because the way that it worked the last 2 years is Mike Mickens was primarily responsible for designing the coverage structure at Notre Dame. And then Al Golden obviously called plays, but Mike Mickens was responsible for that. Is that going to be the case? So that's something that's going to have to be addressed. But again, this is not a Brian Van Gorder hire, guys. The question here is, will they still be playing championship defense or not? That's a very fair question. Is this defense going to fall into the top 20s and 25s as opposed to being a top 5 or 10? That's a different conversation than, is this guy going to have a stretch of 3 years that is some of the worst we've ever seen in Notre Dame? And that's what happened under Brian Van Gorder. This is not that, just so we're clear, because I want to get rid of the hyperbole here. There's a lot of hyperbole going on in the chat. Number one is, this is not that kind of hire. Number two, guys, if you don't want our opinions and you just want us to trust Marcus Freeman and everything he does, I don't know why you're watching the show. Like, if like somebody just said, and somebody who I adore in the chat, is anyone going to give Marcus Freeman the benefit of the doubt? Right? Super annoying. Marcus Freeman's the head coach. I trust him and will let him tell, then automatically assuming this is bad. Did we lose faith in his decision-making? So why are you watching then? Like, if you just want me to jump on here and say Marcus Freeman is a genius and everything he does is awesome and I fully trust him, why are we doing the show? Like, why are we doing the show? What are we doing here? This is what I don't understand. Is, why do you listen to us? Just listen. If you want us to tell you everything that Marcus Freeman does is amazing, just go do reruns of Marcus Freeman's press conferences on loop the entire offseason. Right? Like, I thought you guys watched our show because you wanted us our honest opinion. Here's what I'll say. I hope Marcus Freeman is right about this. We said at the very beginning, there's some level of benefit of the doubt we have to give him in this hire, but I'm not going to then just go not tell you what I believe simply because we like and support Marcus Freeman. That's not what we do here. And I hope that some of you would have enough faith in us to say we're going to give you our honest opinion, but that we also hope that we're wrong. But if you don't want to have a conversation where we talk about some of the good things that he's done and some of the bad things we've done and then give you our honest assessment, then I don't know what you're watching for, because we've never been a cheerleader channel, ever. And that's what we're going to do here, is there has to be some, as NH just said, some nuanced conversation we're having. There's a lot of things about this hire that don't make sense. I have to think that Marcus Freeman has thought about those things and has answers for those things. I don't know how what he's done in the past and coverage wise is going to fit here, but he's also spent the last 3 years in the NFL. Has his views on coverage changed now that he's spent some time in the NFL, knowing that Marcus Freeman runs sort of an NFL type of coverage structure? I have to think that conversation was had. I can only tell you, though, what we know. That's the reality of it. And I'm so tired of the whole, people didn't like this hire and it worked out. I mean, do we really want to get into that conversation? Because I could point to some hires that were made that didn't work out. That doesn't matter. Every coach makes good hires and every coach makes bad hires. Everyone. Nick Saban, Lou Holtz. I mean, Lou Holtz thought hiring Rick Minner was a good idea. After Barry Alvarez and there was one other coordinator in there. So, that's the thing, is every coach is going to make bad hires. Our job is to talk about it and tell you the good and then tell you the concerns. And so, to me, it's like, okay, that's a question that's going to have to get answered to tell us if this is going to be a good hire or not. How does that part of what he does change? Because you've recruited a defense geared towards playing man-free defense, essentially. You got corners are going to come in and play coverage, man coverage football, and your safeties are going to do a lot of, you got to cover the middle, you got to come downhill. They were a lot of quarters type of defense in the past. Now at Texas, they did a little bit more with their safeties kind of playing middle of the field. Didn't go all that great, but they played a lot of off-zone, off-man coverage at Texas from the film that I saw. It's been a lot different than here. But is he able to change? That's going to be, or adapt. That's going to be a question. And that's why it's important that Mike Mickens stay on staff and have a key role. Because if Mickens is allowed to say, okay, Mike is going to be in charge of putting together the coverage plan, and you've got to fit other stuff around it, then I feel a little bit better about that transition. If that, you know what I mean? Because his defenses were not good at forcing turnovers. They were not good at forcing interceptions. They were decent at being disruptive. They usually improved rushing wise in years like Wisconsin. They got better in year 2. Ohio State, they got better against the run. Ohio State, the biggest improvement I thought he made at Ohio State was run defense. They got better in run defense in his first year. But those are things that I look at, Trevor, and say, if that's still going, then I will feel better about it. And then how long can that continue to go? And the other thing, too, is we have no idea what kind of job he can do past 2 years, because he's never been anywhere more than 2 years as a coordinator. And is that how it's going to be here? Just 2 more years and then they're moving on again? Or is this a hire that maybe lasts a little bit longer? But all I care about now is 2025 and how does the adjustment make in 2025? So those are the question marks that I have, Trev, and some of the things is I don't know, and none of us know, how his thinking about defense has changed with his 4 years in the NFL. 3 as an assistant coach, 1 as a scout. That is the big unknown about. We know a lot of things about what he's done as a college coach, but how has his view of deep, because like what Al Golden ran at Notre Dame is very different than the defense he ran at Virginia and the defense he ran at Temple. Very different. He adapted based on what? His time in the NFL. And then obviously having Mike Mickens on staff. Will Chris Ash go through a similar evolution as what Al Golden went through? That's sort of the hope in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because we're talking about a guy that has yet to step foot on a practice field at Notre Dame. It's all speculation at this point. We just have to go off of his previous track record when he was in college, right? And the last time he was a defensive coordinator in college was a decade ago. And so there's just a lot of different question marks around this. And yeah, look, and I've always been this way. We have this conversation when we talk about position battles, and people are team Estime and team Diggs. And look, dude, I'm team Notre Dame. Whatever helps this program win, and you never know. Maybe Chris Ash comes in and he does a phenomenal job, and
We
the
all hope
defense
that.
doesn't take a step back.
We
Right?
all hope that. We're Notre Dame fans. We hope that that's the case.
Right.
I certainly
Right.
hope that that's the case.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, I came on here and we had a show talking about how we were very vocal about how we wanted it to be Mike Mickens. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not on Notre Dame's coaching staff. That's not up to me. I don't make that decision. And so that's like, to some degree, like, I get it. Like, that's where the trust in Marcus Freeman comes in, because I'm not the head coach at Notre Dame, but we can give our assessment, and what we have to evaluate it on is what he did previously. We can't evaluate what he did at Notre Dame yet because he's not at Notre Dame yet. So that's how I look at it. That's how I look at it.
The one thing about that is important to say is, yes, we made our statement. We think Mike Mickens should be the defensive coordinator. But at the same time, we also said, but Marcus Freeman he knows, right, where where Mike Mickens is and where he thinks Mike Mickens is. And I would give him the benefit of the doubt if he decided to go outside the program to a degree. And that's what I'm saying is, like, I hope this works out. Mm-hmm. I hope that that the conversations that they've had, talking defense, talking scheme, I hope that transition is going to be smooth, because there's been an evolution with Chris Ash as a coach and how he treats people in his 3 to 4 years in the National Football League. That's my hope. And there's to a certain degree, we don't know certain answers to everything. We can talk all we want about the job he did at other schools, which is good, nothing special. That's the problem that I have. I think his recent track record is not glaring. I mean, if we're being honest, since those 2 really good years at Ohio State, he had a failed tenure as the head coach at Rutgers. He had a disastrous defense with Texas. And then he had 3 years in the NFL for bad teams. 1 year with Urban in Jacksonville, that was a dumpster fire. He spent 2 years with the Raiders, and that train wreck of an organization. And then this past year, he was a scout with the Jaguars. Last time he was really on a good team was 2015 at Ohio State. And that's a little bit of a concern as well, where people talk about how this is similar to Al Golden. Al Golden was the linebackers coach and was the primary third down play caller for the AFC champions the year before he came to Notre Dame. These two things are not the same.
Right.
These are not the same. And that's where we're at. But like, my frustration is not that they didn't promote Mike Mickens. That's right. I have a level of, okay, and Coach Freeman knows where the staff is. He knows what the needs of the program are more than we do. So if he doesn't think Mike Mickens is the right guy for the job, I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to just crush him for it. My issue is more specifically, I don't like this particular hire. And when you have guys like Jim Leonhard out there, do what you got to do to make it happen. Reports are today that Jim Leonhard's decided to stay in the NFL. Okay, fair enough. But there's so many. It's not Jim Leonhard to Chris Ash. There's a lot of other good defensive coordinators out there. I don't understand why there was a need to rush this, and there was not a need to rush this, which leads me to believe that Marcus Freeman wanted to go this route. This was not a panic move. This was a decision he decided to go with. I think there's obviously has to be some level of relationship there. They have the same agent. I don't know what role that played. John Bryce reported that as well, that Marcus Freeman and Chris Ash have the same agent. I'll be honest, that's concerning. You know what I mean? Like, Urban Meyer's singing Chris Ash's praises. I don't know if, that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy about it. But it's just, the whole process is odd. I mean, Marcus Freeman's talking about Mike Mickens is ready to be a D coordinator and he's trying to elevate. Well, then you get to this and it's like, okay, what message did you just send to teams that may want to hire Mike Mickens as a coordinator? He's ready to be a coordinator, just not for me. And then you bring in a guy who hasn't been a coordinator in 5 seasons, and that was a disaster. And then before that, hadn't been a coordinator in a decade, right? And that was very good. it just, I mean, Joe Rossi's not interested in leaving Michigan State. He interviewed him last time. I talked to somebody yesterday who's very connected in the Big Ten, and he said Joe Rossi would be a absolute grand slam home run hire. I know Marcus Freeman knows who he is. He interviewed him last time. So clearly Coach Freeman said, I think Chris Ash is the guy. We're going to find out if he was right or wrong. I don't like the move. I don't like the hire. But as you said, Trev, I hope he's right.
Mm-hmm. Sure do.
Yeah, hope he's right.
Sure do. There's another replacement that Notre Dame is going to have to kind of juggle with in the offseason, right? And a replacement that we're looking to get to. And before we talk about that, guys, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame football and college football as much as you do. And as always, the best way to support what we do here at Irish Breakdown is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, sticking with the theme of replacements for the Notre Dame team in the offseason. And this one, not an on-the-field coach, right? Not a defensive coordinator, but obviously by now everybody knows that Chad Bowden, Notre Dame's general manager, oversaw recruiting, handful of other jobs, made his way out to USC, and that was announced this past Friday. So it's another thing that Marcus Freeman and his staff, 1A, 1B, defensive coordinator, general manager, director of recruiting, those both need replaced, and you found that out really in the span of like 3-4 days. So the offseason job for Marcus Freeman just got a little bit more steep. And with this guy, you talk about Chad Bowden. I'm in the same boat as you, man. I'm not somebody that the second they decide to leave Notre Dame, slander the specific job that they did. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of how he left.
Yes.
Or where
that
he
was
went.
looking around each of the last two off seasons,
Right.
with Michigan last year.
Right.
I don't love that either. True.
Yeah. That's something that I'm not a fan of. But there is something to be said about when he was here and when he was doing his job. He brought in good talent. You know what I'm saying? Guys like Kingston and Bryce Young and all the CJ Carr, like those all those guys came in while he was in South Bend, right? And so
I give Tommy Reese the credit for CJ Carr, though. By the way, that was all Tommy Reese. But
sure.
Your point, however, you look at all the freshmen and sophomores playing for Notre Dame this year, all the transfer guys that impacted Notre Dame in the last 2 years. Those were all guys that were brought in under Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden's leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be able to say, look, guy did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
As a recruiter, he did a great job, while also saying, like, here's where I'm at with Chad Bowden. I think Chad is an exceptional recruiter. And I think he is exceptional at overseeing a recruiting operation, especially when you've got a head coach like Marcus Freeman, who is a dynamic recruiter as well. He's not going to have that at USC. My concern with Chad was more so the shifting dynamics of college football. And how did he fit where, like, when he was initially promoted to GM just a year ago, it kind of made sense because basically he was just going to oversee all the recruiting. College football has changed even faster and more than I thought it was going to change. And what I mean by that is a GM now has to, he has to almost, like, I pushed back on the notion when general managers started getting hired that they needed to be like NFL guys, because it was we've seen so much change over the last year. The way that the portal and NIL has exploded, and you've got to basically re-recruit your roster every year. I've been told this is true at Notre Dame and other schools, that some players are not even going to their exit interviews anymore. Their agents are going for them. Like, it's getting nuts. And now I think the GM role has quickly changed to where it almost has to be kind of like a player personnel guy, like a general manager. You're doing contracts and budgets and salary caps and all this other kind of stuff. I don't know that that's where Chad Bowden should be spending his time. And so when I look at this role, I think Chad was exceptional at recruiting. I think that some of the running the program, the way that a GM needs to run the program, I don't know if that was going to fit him quite as well. And so when you look at that, Trev, you can say, phenomenal job, dude. Don't like the way you left, but you did a great job. This team is built for success, a large part because of the job that he's done. There's a reason Marcus Freeman brought him from Cincinnati and kept promoting him at Notre Dame. He got a big payday. Good for him. Happy for him. Now it's about, so what do they do now? And that's the question for Marcus Freeman. Does he just replace him with somebody? Or what I would consider doing is kind of a shift focus a little bit when it comes to the roles. And what I mean by that is I think there needs to be a general manager that is more of a big picture GM, and then a player personnel guy, whether it's recruiting director, director of player personnel, don't care, that then basically does what Chad did before now, meaning recruit. You know what I mean? And your entire job is about talent acquisition. And then hire a general manager to be more of you're going to have a role in talent acquisition, but your role is not so much in recruiting as much as it's let's get deals done that need to get done. Let's make sure that we're taking care of our current roster. I think the GM now has to spend a lot more time taking care of the current roster than they did before this, a year or two ago. And it's hard to do all of those things effectively. And I'll just be honest with some things that I've been told. Notre Dame was at risk of losing some very important players this year because they weren't doing enough, so I was told, of being proactive with money while other schools were throwing big dollar amounts at their players. Part of that is because I think Chad, for example, was being pulled in so many different directions of recruiting and talent acquisition and all that it's like, okay, how can he also then, handle all this stuff with the 85 guys on scholarship? And so I don't know if Coach Freeman sees it the way that I do, but I'm very curious if he's going to sort of take that one position and separate it and make kind of two positions that now, instead of, because again, what the vision was for a GM 2 years ago is just out the window now with all the changes in college football, Trevor. And so that's what I think should happen, is sort of a director of player personnel type of role that's recruit, talent acquisition. And then a general manager that oversees that, right? He's the boss, but he's not necessarily doing all of it. But his big role is also making sure that the roster is in a healthy place, that they're being proactive with NIL deals and things like that with players. And I'll just tell you, because we're a lot of this show has been negative because we don't like the DC hire, but and some of you know that some of the issues that I have been told and I believe are going on the offensive line, but as a whole, part of the reason that they didn't have any portal guys leave. I mean, we kept hearing this running back's going to leave, and this receiver's going to leave, and this DB might leave, and this DB's getting money thrown at him, but what's happening there? None of them left. Why? Because there is a very strong culture throughout most of the program that guys will say, hey, coach, like, look, I thought about leaving because this money was thrown at me, but I want to be a part of what we're doing here at Notre Dame, and I understand the bigger picture. But eventually, the money's going to get to the point, or things are going to happen to where it's going to be harder to get kids to buy into that. And what Notre Dame doesn't have to do is match all these kids. It's just you need to be more proactive. Like somebody texted me the other day, and it was a great comment, that right now Notre Dame's personnel stuff is more reactive than proactive. And it's hard to be proactive when the person running it has to also recruit and transfer portal and do all this kind of stuff. That's why I really do think having two roles, one that is focused on just talent acquisition and the other is sort of a bigger picture, oversee all this, but I'm also focused really a lot on my current roster and then making the salary cap that's going to start now. I mean, look, guys, this next year, the rev share starts. And you're officially paying players this next year. The fun that Brady Quinn started is no more. It's a different world now. And that is a full-time job in and of itself. So going and getting someone who's got sort of an NFL background, there's been a lot of, a name that's thrown around is like a Lake Dawson, who can kind of come in and have a little bit of that role and then hire someone else to kind of do what Chad did. I think it would be the smart way to go for this hire, Trev. I'm just curious if Coach Freeman sees it the same way.
Yeah, I mean, Chad was spread thin when he was at Notre Dame, just strictly because of the demands of the job, because of the ever-changing landscape of college football. That I agree with. I mean, college football's in a day and age now where it just has to be managed differently, right? You need somebody. The job of retaining a program and going out and hunting and getting new additions is not the job of one sole person anymore. It just can't be. Right. And I'm with you. The culture at Notre Dame, you hear all the alum talk about it. And obviously we know about it as fans. And the culture at Notre Dame is different than it is at other places. But if we're calling a spade here, you can't expect multiple 18, 19, 20-year-olds to continue to buy into that when they know that people and players and kids that they went to camps with, that they went to high school with, all start making a crazy amount of money. Right. And so that's something where I agree Notre Dame definitely has to start being more proactive instead of reactive. And again, I think you're going to start seeing that shift within the program once they split up the job duties of the GM entirely, right? They need at least one person handling recruiting operations and going out and getting new talent for this team. And you need somebody that oversees the retention of this team and maintaining and making sure that the players that they have are happy instead of waiting to hear that they could potentially go be happy somewhere else. Then Notre Dame is in a position to respond. And so for me, I think that's where the shift needs to be, right? Because with how quickly the landscape is changing in college football, I don't know how much more it's going to be a factor of like, well, hey, the culture at Notre Dame is great. And it's like, yeah, man, and there's another place that I could go and potentially compete for a national championship and they're paying me more money because everybody's personal life is different. That's another factor now that you have to count into. So for me, I think that's a shift, right? I still think Notre Dame as an institution and as a university has more to offer than most, if not all, Division I, Power IV football programs. But at the end of the day, when you have kids that are getting recruited at that high of a level, at the end of the day, they want to go play on Sundays, right? And so it's going to be different, man. They're going to have to split up those job duties so the next person. That's just kind of where some of it went with Chad. I really do. So I know that kind of covered most of the topics and you hinted at it a little bit, but like, is that where you would start? Is like somebody with some sort of NFL background to handle more the general manager?
I think with the portal window closing, my biggest priority is the recruiting guy, whether that's promoting a guy like Caleb Davis or Carter Allman or going outside. I know there was a something I saw on Football Scoop yesterday about a guy that works at North Carolina, Patrick Sudis, I think is his name, and he's been he's kind of done what Chad's done at North Carolina and Georgia Tech and some other places. Don't know a lot about him, but he's got the resume's impressive and the results have been impressive. So I couldn't advocate, oh, that's the guy, because I don't know a lot about him, but just with a quick look at the resume, you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And if they did that route, it's like, look, you've got some. Caleb Davis is a rising star in the recruiting circle. He'll be doing what Chad Bowden is doing sooner rather than later, even if you don't think his time is now. He's a young guy. That's Jared Parker hired him to do that. Wisconsin was trying to hire Carter Allman to be their their Chad Bowden, and they got him to stay. So if you bring in a guy like that, he's going to have a pretty good staff. There's some. Notre Dame's recruiting operation right now, and a big part of this is Marcus Freeman fighting to get more resources for the recruiting office. And then Chad Bowden made some strong hires and delegating different things. Like they have people that run people say, well, how can the recruiting operation go so well this weekend with Chad leaving, as if, we didn't need Chad. And I'm like, no, like they hired people to run this type of stuff and it was already planned out. And that just shows how much of a well-oiled machine this has become at Notre Dame, that it's kudos to Chad for creating that, but now you need someone to come in and kind of oversee it a little bit more. And so That to me is the most important hire because you're going to have more visits. Your coaches are all on the road this week. Like me, this is why I said that the defensive coordinator hire didn't need to be the fastest one that was done, because I think you've got more time for that. Not that you can drag it out till March per se, but you don't need to make the hire this quickly unless you know who you want. I'm just saying hypothetically. I'm not speaking to the Chris Ash situation at all. But this is the one that has to happen quickest because you're now getting right into recruiting mode. I mean, yeah, you had a great recruiting visit. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But now it's the follow-up is going to determine just how ultimately successful recruiting weekends are. Recruiting weekends are great at getting you trending in a good direction. But what matters ultimately is what happens coming out of the visit. Who's that person overseeing, making sure everybody's kind of going in the same direction? That's sort of a question mark now. And that's why I think that hire needs to be first. And then within that, if you are going to make a separate hire, you're also looking for the GM type of person as well, because you can't go too far without that person not being involved as well. If you're going to hire one person to do it all, okay, that's fine too. But the timeline's still the same. So I think this move has to happen pretty quickly. It's got to be the right hire, but it does have to happen pretty quickly because you can't lose the momentum. Like, here's the risk that Notre Dame runs with Chad leaving and all this. You have got so much positive momentum going with your program right now. You just went 14-2. You just played for the national championship. Marcus Freeman's right now, I'd argue the kind of the hottest coach, the hottest ascending coach of college football. You know, all the air that was used on Dan Lanning last offseason is now being used on Marcus Freeman now. You got to strike while the iron's hot recruiting-wise. And they did a great job of that this weekend, which we'll talk about in the recruiting hour. But if you don't make the right hire or in the time frame, then you can lose a little bit of that momentum. And so that's why I think just from a timing standpoint, not that the recruiting coordinator is more important than defensive coordinator or whatever the case may be, it's more so just timing-wise, I think that one has to be made with more expedience than necessarily a defensive coordinator hire does. And that's where I'm coming from on that, because you need to get that guy rocking and rolling, because if you're on the message board, I put a coaches on the road piece out last night. They are going – first of all, they had a lot of dudes on campus this weekend, like dudes. And today, just today alone, I'm like top 100 D end, top 100 linebacker, top 100 linebacker, big time 2027 quarterback, top 100 running back. I mean, they're going out to Bosco, they're going out to Modern Day. Like Notre Dame is like they're getting out there and seeing dudes. But that's why it's important to get the recruiting operation in place so you have all hands on deck. And Caleb Davis and Carter Allman are doing a great job. And the names of some of the other, there's a couple ladies that are involved in the recruiting operation, whose names escape me, but they're killing it right now. I mean, they're doing a great job of keeping this thing going, but eventually they're going to all need to kind of know, who are we answering to, who's in charge, what are we doing? And the longer you go without that hire, the more things may fall through the cracks. But right now, this recruiting staff is just kind of taking it and just running with it. And that's why this weekend's visit went so well, despite the fact that Chad had left. So I think this is a very important hire. This is the one I'm most intrigued by, because the resumes of these type of people are Zaire Turner. Thank you. And she's one of them. And then there's some others that are part of it too. There's another lady who's the director of on-campus recruiting. I can't remember her name, but I know she does a really good job. I mean, the operation, there's a lot of people involved. Like, it used to just be the recruiting coordinator, the assistant coaches, the head coach, and then you'd have a couple staff members. Now it's you got a whole team. Becca Seitz, that's who the lady I was thinking of. You got a whole team of people that all have different roles that are super important to making sure this thing goes real smooth. And Notre Dame the last 2 years has been killing it in that regard. You just need to make sure that continues. And the name I heard so far, recruiting wise, I like, of what I know about him. But it's harder to evaluate that, because you could look at this Patrick guy's resume, for example, and be like, okay, yeah, he coached at North Carolina and Georgia, recruited at North Carolina and Georgia Tech most recently. You're like, okay, that's a little different animal than recruiting at Notre Dame. And that's very, very true. But the point is like, you can talk to those kind of guys and kind of figure out, okay, this guy's pretty sharp or not, because sometimes you find some of those guys that are kicking tail at that level, and then you put the power of Notre Dame behind him and they thrive. Because look at Chad. Where was Chad before he came to Notre Dame? He was at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you knew the chops were there, and so he comes to Notre Dame. And, of course, now he's got the bigger brand. Like, I've said this before, Trevor, recruiting-wise, you could take the same coach, and he walks into a high school, and he's got FIU on his shirt, and it's like, whatever. That same coach puts an ND on his shirt, or puts a tomahawk on his shirt, or a gator on his shirt, or a U on his shirt, or a Alabama A on his shirt, or a Longhorn on his shirt, and all of a sudden, now that guy's, oh, man, I love that guy, right? Now, he was the same great recruiter at FIU that he is now, but the brand behind him is so much more powerful. And that's why I say find a guy that knows how to do this job, because the brand will sell itself to a degree if you have a guy that's a grinder, if a guy that's good at developing relationships, developing trust. And that's something Chad was great at on the recruiting trail. And that's something Marcus Freeman has been great at. Mike Mickens is great at. Deland McCullough is great at. Some feedback from this weekend. Mike Brown's really getting after it in the 26 recruiting class. All my frustrations with Joe Rudolph as a position coach, recruiting is going pretty well so far. I mean, that party's doing well. So Max Bulla, I think, has made a really big impact here. Al Washington's going out and seeing some dudes these next couple of days in recruiting. And so you look at that and say, things are going really well here. Now the key is keep it going. And the one thing about I do feel about Marcus Freeman is this is something he's always taken a little bit of a special view of. And that's why I do have more confidence here, because I think with the D coordinator hire, a head coach can be more swayed by people he knows, Jim Tressel's, Urban Meyer's, Lou Holtz's, where when jobs like this, it's like, no, you didn't have this. This is my area of expertise, and I'm going to figure this one out. And that's why I'm confident that this part of it's going to keep rolling. But it is important, because you can't lose the momentum you've built on the trail the last couple of years, especially after the season that you just had. And so far, the staff in place is doing a great job of it. Just need to get everybody in place so you can keep it rolling, because the feedback we're getting so far is the season that they had a major impact on some big-time players. Guys that maybe looked at Notre Dame as like, yeah, I like Notre Dame, but now it's like, I like Notre Dame. There's no buts anymore. It's like, I want to go check it out. And you got to capitalize on that. If you don't, you got a short little window to really capitalize on that. And that's what's in front of Notre Dame.
Yeah, Brian, I agree. I mean, I think that's a good segue into the recruiting hour that we have coming up, right? A lot of exciting things that we have to talk about here. Go ahead.
Just a reminder, we are going to do an hour-long mailbag at the end of the show. So if you have questions for the mailbag, go ahead and get those in now. We're only going to do it for an hour. Even if there is enough for an hour, we won't go past an hour. And obviously, super chats get moved to the top. But we're going to go through some recruiting stuff next. But like I said, Trev, go ahead and start getting those mailbag questions in now if you have them.
And before we get to all that, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, whichever platform you guys watch us on. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review, whether that's on Spotify podcasts or Apple Podcasts. And as always, be sure to check out the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. A lot of great, especially now that it's the offseason, a lot of great intel pieces coming out about different recruits and coaching changes. You know, we just got done talking about new defensive coordinator and new general manager, what that could look like. There's going to be more film breakdowns coming out, whether it be for recruits or different things for the 2025 season that we liked from the 2024 season. So you can find all of that at the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, flipping gears a little bit here, talking about Notre Dame's junior day. They just had a lot of high-octane caliber recruits on campus on Saturday for their junior day. And from a lot of the intel pieces that were on the premium message boards, it sounds like a lot of those visits went really, really well, which is exciting to talk about. So getting through it, man, I mean, I know that you put out that intel piece, but kind of walk us through just how the weekend went.
Well, you know, it was interesting, Trevor. I was curious how the weekend was going to go with the weather being what it was. That was obviously a big part of it. Looking at it from the standpoint of um, uh, how would some of the travel, and there were a lot of guys that didn't make it in. Totally coincidental. A lot of the defensive backs didn't make it in. Just totally coincidental there. But Zach Fort didn't make it in, and Jordan Deck didn't make it in. Kasani Giles didn't make it in. A lot of them had some. A lot of it was scheduling issues that they had to kind of work through. But obviously that was something that I was curious about, and how many guys would make it in. One of the offensive linemen, Ogboko, didn't make it in, which is obviously a little disappointing because he's a big time player, but they still had some guys on campus. And so I was very curious to see kind of how the whole operation would go. And it went incredibly well. And obviously one of the big reasons why is the offensive, or the coaching staff had to step up, because they didn't have the, some of the things around them that maybe they would have had before Chad left. And so they did. From everything I've heard, they stepped up and obviously did a great job getting everything going. And obviously the recruiting staff did a great job as well. So Trev, when I look at it, first and foremost, obviously a lot of this would have been on the message board. We put a lot of these this intel pieces on the board yesterday, so you'd have already known some of this stuff. But just kind of looking at it, the big thing that was important this weekend is you had 3 very important receiver prospects on campus. And then you also had one of your top remaining offensive line prospects on campus. And that was a really important one, because finishing off this offensive line class is going to be important. Finishing off this this receiver class is going to be very important. And then, of course, they also had a very important defensive tackle on campus this weekend, and we'll get into as well. But just overall, Trevor, it was a big weekend. It was a very impactful weekend, and Notre Dame made a big move. One of the questions I had coming into the weekend was, how impactful would the season have been? And from what I'm told, it had a major impact. And there's a lot of kids that liked Notre Dame that all of a sudden love Notre Dame now. Guys that had some interest in Notre Dame that all of a sudden love Notre Dame now. And I thought that was impactful. But Trev, let's just kind of start off. What you want us to go? Receivers, O-line, running back, and then we'll dive into defense. Is that direction you want to go with this?
Let's do it, man.
All right. So first of all, there's 4 receivers on campus this weekend. We haven't got an update on the 4th one. That's Devin Fitzgerald, who's the son of Larry Fitzgerald. So we won't talk about him because we haven't gotten an update on him yet. But 3 guys that were on campus this weekend that were very important and very impactful. And again, not that Devin Fitzgerald wasn't. We just don't have an update on him. So that's why we won't talk about him. But you had Connor Salmon, who has been a big-time target for Notre Dame for quite some time, receiver from Virginia. You had Braden Robinson on campus this weekend, who's a burner from the state of Texas. He's run as low as 10.3. I think his personal best 100-meter dash is a 10.34. And he's a big-time playmaker. And then you had Caden Finley, who was on campus as well. He's a top 100 recruit out of the state of Texas. 2 kids from the state of Texas. A lot of Texas kids on campus this weekend, by the way. Yeah. Which is intentional. It's always intentional. But what it shows is, like last year, they tried to recruit Texas. There just weren't a lot of fits down there. And this year, there's a lot of fits down in Texas. And so we're going to talk about that. But looking at these 3 receivers, they needed to make a big splash. And I was very curious, like, how the season went, and all that, how impacted would receivers be. I'm floored at how interested these receivers are in Notre Dame. Floored. And these aren't like low-level guys that, nobody's ever heard of, and you're hoping that Notre Dame can turn them into players, and I don't know if they're any good or not. And these are dudes. I mean, Connor Salmon is a dude who's got offers from, big-time programs, Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame. Obviously, there's some big-time programs after this kid. Braden Robinson is another 4-star top-ranked guy that Notre Dame is after. Caden Finley's a top 100 recruit nationally. And the only reason Braden Robinson isn't ranked even higher is because he's maybe 5'9". Like, maybe 5'9". But you know what he can do, Trev? He can fly. and then Caden Finley's the top 100 guy. So like these are, and you look at Caden, you look at Braden Robinson's offer list. You look at LSU, Miami, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M, big time programs after him. Obviously Notre Dame as well. Michigan is after him. You look at the same thing. Connor Solomon, Caden Finley, same thing. These are big time receivers, and I'm thinking like, okay, are they going to be able to do anything with them? And the big takeaway from this weekend is they absolutely blew it out of the park. Notre Dame is very much selling, we did this because this is what fit our personnel. This is what we're going to do. How do you know that we're going to do that? Look at the kids on our roster. There's no Riley Leonard on our roster next year. There's CJ Carr. There's Kenny Minchie. There is Steve Angeli. There's Blake Hebert. We've got a commitment from Noah Grubbs. These are throwers. That has been huge selling point. And then, of course, when Mike Denbrock's most recent pupil is playing in the NFC Championship game as a rookie in Jaden Daniels, that's been impactful as well. So the staff has done a great job of it. The feedback we got on the job Mike Brown did this weekend was excellent. He's put them in great position with these guys, really selling his vision for where they want to take the offense. And the other thing Mike Brown has done a good job of is looking at how well the receivers played down the stretch when provided opportunities. I mean, they made some big plays against Indiana. We saw them step up and make big plays. Obviously, Jaden Greathouse went off in the semifinal game against Penn State in the championship game. You had guys making more and more plays. So, you know, that's been something that they're selling. But his thing has been, look at the growth we made throughout the season in year one. You know, we had some, we had to have this kind of guy, but, we want to be we want to be a development program. We don't want to be a portal receiver program every year. We did that last year. We're going to do that again in 2025 because we need to. That's why we got Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. But the goal is to recruit and develop high school players. That's the message that Mike Brown has given. And so far, he's knocking it out of the park with these receivers. I mean, I would say that Mike Brown's probably the biggest reason that Connor Solomon is looking at Notre Dame. Like, that relationship has been really strong. He's really growing a strong relationship with the two Texas kids that visited this weekend. So the message between like Denbrock and him has been huge. So specifically getting down to the weekend, Trev, with Connor Solomon, it was it's interesting. They did it differently with each kid. So like with Connor Solomon, he's been on campus so many times that it was about getting him around the commits. It was about getting him around Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman more than Mike Brown, because he's already got that great relationship with Mike Brown. I was told that a lot of the commits hung around him like all weekend. Like, hey, because he's getting closer and closer to making a decision, and Notre Dame is near the top of the list. But it was kind of like you're in closing mode now with Connor Salmon, and where the other guys, it's like you're still building. So I thought that went great. I mean, the feedback we got on the visit was it knocked it out of the park. Just, I don't know if I'd say that Notre Dame is definitely the number one team. Like, nobody else is close. I think Notre Dame and Penn State have started to separate themselves from everybody else. I think that's where we're at. And I think that's because Penn State's done a great job recruiting the state of Virginia for years. I mean, guys that I played against went to Penn State. I played against James Boyd. He went to Penn State. I remember recruiting that area. Chris Bell is a wide receiver that went to Penn State. He was after me. DJ Dozier went to the same high school I went to way before I did. He went to Penn State. They've done a great job. I mean, Penn State has for decades has been a major player in Virginia, and they should be considered a major player here. But my understanding is Notre Dame and Penn State are the two teams that have kind of separated themselves from the pack with Connor Salmon. Now it's about closing on him. That's a big one. We'll break down the film in a little bit, Trev, because he's a dude. Braden Robinson, this was his his first visit to campus. So this was a big one, and he came with his parents. His dad is his high school football coach. Now, here's the interesting thing about Braden Robinson. Dynamic athlete, 10-300 guy. The film, as you guys are going to see, is really impressive. He's a burner, but he's also a really high academic kid. Like, this is a big part of his decision. Doesn't mean that he's going to pick Notre Dame just because of that, but that's where a lot of his interest in Notre Dame came from. So the early interest in Notre Dame was more about the academic piece and less about the football part because of reasons that we've talked. And so now the football piece, he was one of those guys I was told the season had a major impact on him. Like his interest is more big picture, which you like. But now the football piece is a big part of that. And the message they have for him as a returner, as a receiver, and the uniqueness that he brings, the different ways they'd like to use him, screen game, jet sweeps, vertical stuff, return game. He was really impressed by what Notre Dame's pitch is for how he specifically uniquely fits into the offense. And they hit it out of the park. I mean, absolutely hit it out of the park with him, Trev. So, but coming with his parents was obviously a big part in getting, selling that to him. And then the other player is Caden Finley. And he was on campus this weekend. Now, he has been on campus before, but this is the first time he came with both of his parents. And I think this is the first time his dad has been on campus. His dad is Jermichael Finley, who played tight end at Texas and also played tight end for the Green Bay Packers. As we all know, Notre Dame tends to do very well with players whose dads played in the NFL for a host of reasons. So obviously there's an interest in Caden Finley, but here's an interesting thing. I don't know that the previous recruiting coordinator was as high on Caden Finley as the receivers coach is on Caden Finley. Well, that's not there anymore. And so this was all about Mike Brown and Mike Denbrock's vision for him. And they did a great job with him. Really emphasized, the fit. They see him as a slot and a field guy. They see a lot of Jaden Greathouse in him. And that was kind of their pitch to him. Hey, look at this other Texas star, played at Austin Westlake, came here, played as a freshman. Year 2, he emerges in the playoffs as our go-to guy, leading receiver. And then he's going to be great moving forward. And so that was obviously a big selling point. And they kind of built similarly. They play similarly. And I think that was a big push. So what was interesting is they really turned the heat up on him this weekend compared to where it's been, because I think there's different decision makers being made. First visit, obviously there's a lot of work to be done with him, but Notre Dame shot way up his list based on what happened this weekend. So that's how the receivers went. Somebody in the chat just said, I saw Dylan McCullough talking with a kid and his family at Embassy Suites on Friday. What running backs recruits were on campus this weekend? There was one that matters more than anybody else, and that's Jonas Walton, running back from Georgia. You could make a case that he might be their top guy on their board. There's a couple guys that I know I think Coach McCullough really likes, but I think he's at the top of the board. Big time player from the state of Georgia. This is his first campus. This is his first visit to campus. He likes Dylan McCullough a lot. He likes what the running backs have done a lot, but obviously getting to know Notre Dame, that's a different animal, especially coming from the South in the middle of winter. They did a great job on that one. So they're going to be a major player for Jonas Walton moving forward. He's very much a Notre Dame kid. But as we know, Trevor, convincing a Southern kid how much of a Notre Dame kid he is can be challenging.
Sure.
And that's what this weekend was about with Coach McCullough, with Coach Freeman, with Coach Denbrock. It was, dude, you are exactly what we want at running back at Notre Dame. As a player, as a young man, as a student, you fit what we're trying to do. And they did a tremendous job. Again, long way to go. He's going to take official visits. I don't expect any movement there as far as making a decision. Anything can happen in recruiting, but in that one, he's just like Connor Salmon, he has a process that they have set out for themselves, and they're probably going to stick to that, much like Jadon Blair did last year. And so I think that was a big one too. He is a really talented player, and we'll break down his film at some point in time as well moving forward. But they needed to kind of make a strong impression now that he's on campus, and they absolutely made a strong impression there, Trev. Last on the offensive side of the ball, offensive line. Obviously, you had your 2 commits on campus, and then you had 2 other offensive linemen on campus this weekend that were sort of top of the list guys. Number 1 is obviously Tyler Merrill, who's from Pennsylvania, has been a must-get recruit for Notre Dame for quite some time. Massive kid, top 100 recruit, like 6'5", 320. I mean, just a really impactful player. Bulldozer of an offensive lineman, Trevor. Bulldozer. Notre Dame, Penn State, I think trying to think, who is this top 5? It's Notre Dame, Penn State, Alabama, Clemson are schools that are that were in his top list. I always felt like Notre Dame and Penn State were probably his top 2. I love where Notre Dame is at with him now. And with this visit, obviously there's some things, some closing that needs to be done, but this was a huge impactful weekend for them with Tyler Merrill. Getting him around the other 2 commits, that was a big thing. How you fit into the offense, how we see you, all those type of things were there. And then they also extended an offer, Trevor, to Evan Goodwin, who plays at Pulaski County in Arkansas. Big 6'7" kid, over 300 pounds, pure tackle, quality prospect. They offered him this weekend. Things went very well, very early stages. So I don't know that there's a push to get him to commit anytime soon. I don't think he's in a hurry to commit, but Notre Dame immediately obviously jumped into his top group. He's been on campus before. He was at camp this summer. So there's clearly interest in this kid. This is the 2nd trip he's made to campus, I believe, maybe 3rd, without an offer. I mean, that kind of says all you need to know about his interest in Notre Dame. And then, of course, the offer came this weekend. So that was obviously a big one there as well. So, I mean, I don't know if it could have gone any better, honestly, this weekend, Trevor, with the offensive recruiting. I mean, it's really like, dude, did they really knock it out of the park with each guy? Or are you just being, that's the feedback we're getting from both our sources and then also with the guys talking to the players. I mean, just needle moving weekend when it came to offensive recruiting, especially receiver and running back. Because like offensive line, it's like, okay, you're already in a great place with Tyler Merrill. Just keep building that relationship. You know, you've obviously got a good early connection with Evan Goodwin. Just, keep building that relationship. With these other guys, it's like these visits were going to tell you whether you had a shot to get Jonas Walton. It was going to tell you if you had a shot to get Braden Robinson, if you had a shot to get Caden Finley. Like if you didn't knock this out of the park, you were going to be behind all those other schools and you were not going to be able to make up ground. They needed to knock it out of the park, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park with offensive recruiting.
I know we're going to break down film here in a second, and that's kind of where I began with my evaluation of these guys, right? And it gives you a lot of hope, right? Because these are high school tapes. Like you go and you think of a guy like a Braden Robinson. Like that's like some of the high school highlight films that you see kids going down south into the SEC, right? I mean, again, he's from Texas, and so it makes sense. But there's a lot of
he's the guy we look at and say, why can't Notre Dame get guys
right?
Like that?
Literally. I mean, I was going through and I was watching his and Caden Finley's and Connor Salmon's, and I was looking at these guys, and it's just like, see, these are guys that historically make their trip down to the SEC, or they follow Brian Hartline and they go back up to Ohio State, right? Because the Ohio State Texas recruiting pipeline is really, really strong. But you go through and you look at what their film is and I can even see it, right? Like their fits and what the offense is and what Mike Denbrock wants to do with this offense. And so it just gives you a lot of hope, right? Because Notre Dame recruiting film in the past of some guys, especially at receiver, has been like, okay, quality dude. I see the upside. There's not a whole lot of run after the catch with some guys. You know what I'm saying? Like it's, no disrespect to past Notre Dame receivers that have came through.
Because you need guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But when that is the bulk, if not all of what your recruiting class is at wide receiver, you start to see different playmakers come in at the high school level. I mean, the stuff that, and I know we're going to dive into the film here in a little bit, but the stuff that Braden Robinson's able to do with the football in his hands is just absolutely insane.
Right. Building a receiving core, Trevor, is about putting different types of players together.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have all Braden Robinsons.
Sure.
You can't have all Jaden Greathouses. You can't have all Jordan Faisons. You can't have all Malachi Fieldses. You need different types of receivers, in my opinion. And honestly, the thing I like about the 3 kids they had on campus this weekend is they could literally all play together on the field. And then, of course, you have Dylan Faison already in the class.
Right.
And so that's one thing I really like about this group is that you're getting guys with how Caden Finley plays the game is very different from Braden Robinson, and how Braden Robinson and Caden Finley play the game is very different from how Connor plays the game. And those are things that I think are very important.
Yeah,
when you're breaking down this film.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it after the 2023 season, right? Is that it's so tough when you have a receiving core that's built of like all guys that essentially can kind of do the same thing. You know, diversity in the receiving room is huge, and that's something that they didn't have in 23. You started to see a little bit of it in 2024, right? They used Jordan Faison differently than what they used Jaden Greathouse. They used both of those guys different than what they would use Bo Collins. So now it's just about elevating those positions, right? And you go through and you go and look at the transfer portal. They added Malachi Fields, and I love Bo Collins and what he did at Notre Dame, but you look at Malachi Fields and you get an upgrade in the boundary position, right? But you still maintain the pieces like a Jaden Greathouse. And so all that stuff's exciting to see. And now that it's those voids are now starting to be filled through high school recruiting, and that pipeline, not just the transfer portal, leaves a lot of room for excitement. And it's something that I'm looking forward to and seeing those guys in a Notre Dame uniform. That is absolutely for sure. Switching gears now, Bryan, because there's a good amount of really highly touted defensive recruits as well that were on campus on Saturday. When you go through and you look at some of them, how did their visits go? What were some of the takeaways, big needle movers, things like that?
Yeah, so the defense was a little bit different, Trev, because you had some guys on campus that are kind of either newer prospects or some guys that maybe there was uncertainty where you stood. And it was a smaller group of guys. There was a couple guys that they're still getting in the process of knowing, like Joey Quinn, who's a kid from Chicago that I like on film. But it's kind of like, okay, we're still in the evaluation process. Let's get to know each other. It's a little bit of a different type of visit. The Dixon kid who's on campus is similar. So you're not, haven't made offers yet, still kind of evaluating, but really want to get to know them as young men, size them up, that type of thing. And there was one kid on campus, especially that I think the staff loved his film, but wanted to get him on campus and size him up first before an offer went out. Because, and when you see film of him, you'll understand why. But the kid that they brought in was a young man by name Ebenezer Iwatiti, I think is how you say that. He's from South Garner, North Carolina. Trevor, when I watch the film, I'm literally, and I don't like doing this all the time, but sometimes like comps need to be when they just come to you. Like that's when I like using comps. And I'm watching this kid play on film and I'm like, Julian Akwara. I mean, just on repeat. It's on loop in my head. This is Julian Akwara. 6'4". I was told he actually measured in at Notre Dame at 221, which means he's continuing to bulk up. He was like a $180 not that long ago. I mean, you see some pictures of him as like a freshman and sophomore, and he is skinny, just like Julian was. But he's super long. He's like that kind of kid that can kind of scratch his knee without bending over. You know what I mean? He's got that kind of crazy length. Super twitchy off the edge. I don't care what his recruiting ranking is, because he's not a kid that's ranked really all that high, Trevor. I mean, I don't know that anybody has him in like the top 250.
No.
I think Rivals has him they have him as a 4-star, but he's not ranked by them. I think On3 has him, or I think 247 has him as a 3-star, I believe. But yeah, they have him the number 27 player in North Carolina. But then you look at his offer list and you're like, yeah, something doesn't look right here. Notre Dame, Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, Miami, Ohio State, right? Okay, that's an impressive offer list for a 3-star. Very impressive offer list. And the film supports the offer list, not the ranking, not the recruiting ranking. This is his ranking and his offer list. Well, depending on where he commits to, his ranking will probably skyrocket. His offer list is going to keep getting better. This is a kid that's super raw, needs to be developed physically, but there's some big time explosiveness there. He came on campus this weekend with no offer, which I think says a lot. Now, he probably knew that an offer might be coming, but he got offered on campus. And essentially, from what I have gathered, it was as soon as they sized him up and saw that all the measurements they had were legit, offer. I mean, it came quick. He's that kind of elite, twitchy edge rusher that we say Notre Dame doesn't get enough of, although they've got Boubacar and Logan Thomas. He's like that kind of guy. He's that, which they didn't. What's the one thing I complained about the D-line class last year? There was just not that twitchy edge rusher, that viper guy that can just get after the quarterback. They didn't have that, and that's why we wanted Marco Jones. He is that. He'll need some time, but man, he is a dude. I mean, he is an absolute dude from a talent standpoint. And I think Notre Dame did a tremendous job on him. And they've been doing a great job coming in. I've been told that Al Washington has really knocked it out of the park with him. Really good relationship there. Now it's about taking it to the next level. There's going to be some big-time schools coming after him, especially now that Notre Dame is offered. You're going to see even more schools start getting involved with him. But they put themselves with the offer and the visit this weekend and just the vision for how they see him. They put themselves in a great position with him moving forward. Now it's about take that next step, close on him. A lot of work to be done with him, but this was a big visit for him. The follow-up's got to be key. That's going to be the key. Build on the momentum you built this weekend because, again, some of you that care about recruiting rankings and all that, I understand it. You're probably not going to be impressed, but just trust me on this one. This is one that they're missing on. This kid has big time talent. Trevor, the whole time I'm saying that, I just see you shaking your head like, yep, you saw the film. He's one of those 5 clippers. They used to call him back. The old school coaches would call him like, what'd they call it? Like, they'd call like inches or 3 feet guys because it's 3 feet of film. He's one of those kids that you watch 5 clips of and you're just like, all right, this is a guy we want. And you don't need to see a whole lot to see that, just that burst off the edge, that length, and you're like, this guy's got a little something special. This guy's got a little something special to it.
Yeah, I went through and I watched the film of everybody that you put on that intel piece, right? And he was one of the guys that jumped off the page at me too. Extremely long. He's very twitchy. And like he is a raw kid, but like you look at the things that he needs to improve on, and it's all things that are like fixable. Right? Like it's not, he's just not long enough to play Viper at Notre Dame. Like obviously that's the first thing that you see. He has a nose for the football. There was one play on his highlight film where he stripped the running back and he made contact with him on like the opposite side of his ball carrying hand. And it wasn't like he adjusted himself and moved around. He wrapped him up and then just his arms are long enough that he just came back down over after making contact with him and forced the football out. Now I will say like some of it, it's just his raw ability as a rush end, right? Like he tackles a little high. That's a fixable fundamental thing, right? But some of that is because he does a really good job of ripping out the football, and so some of it is correcting some of those mistakes. All very fixable things, but the raw foundation that you need and what you look for in a rush or in a Viper, in a defensive end, in a premier edge rusher, he's got twitch, he's got length, he has good size. Sounds like from what his measurements are is he's not done bulking up either. Right, he still has a senior year of high school to go through. Now, like I'm not saying that he's going to go from 221 to 245, but a great foundation for Al Washington and the rest of the coaching staff to work with. So, no, he was a lot of fun to watch on film, man. I mean, he was a guy that I immediately noticed when I was going through film. That's for sure. Sticking along the defensive line, another defensive lineman that came in was Tiki Hala. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be Hola, but I think it's Hala.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Okay. He was also on campus this weekend. And
another Texas kid.
Yep. Another Texas kid, another kid from down south. Good size for being a junior in high school right now. When I looked at his recruiting profile, he's already up to 285. He's like 6'2.5". He's a 4-star kid from down south. So how did Notre Dame do with him on junior day?
So this is an interesting one, Trevor, because he announced a top 5 before the junior day, and Notre Dame was a part of it. It was Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, USC, and I believe SMU are his 5. If you were going to rank those 5, Notre Dame coming into the visit would have been at best 4th, at best. He's a guy that I was talked to before the season started. Different sources that I have before the season, and they're like, this is a guy we want. There's just a long way to go, a lot of work to be done. They were even lower than 4th or 5th on his list then, but they just kept grinding, and stayed on him. And because this is the kind of kid that Notre Dame needs more of. He's not like a 320-pound monster, but he's going to be over 300 pounds. I saw one service had him listed at 270. He's not 270. He's closer to 285, 290. He'll easily be a 300 to 310 pound kid when it's all said and done. Good quickness, powerful, really powerful. And just that kind of that run stuffing playmaker that can also disrupt that they don't have a lot of. And as you've heard me say, Trevor, if you don't get some kid, like if I would have a rule if I was Marcus Freeman, if we don't get one like kid with some sort of Polynesian type of Hawaiian background in the front seven every year, you're fired, right? I almost had to fire everybody last year, but then Madden Ferramo saved them and committed, right? So they got that. But like these kids just, I think, are such great fits for what Notre Dame's all about. They've had easy transitions, and they're the kind of physical, relentless type of player that you just want. And you know, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but like, let's be honest, they've had a lot of success with those type of players at Notre Dame, going all the way back to Manti. But this kid fits that. It was now about convincing him that he fits that. They are not his number one now. They're not the leader. They're not the team to beat anymore, but they made a move this weekend. And I'm confident saying I don't think they're 5 anymore. And they have now piqued his interest to the point where I'll be shocked if he doesn't come back for an official visit. Like, they made a move here. Again, still a lot of work to be done, but I don't know if they could have done any better this weekend with him, because it's not realistic. He's not going to come in with the top 5. You're 5 and he commits in the week. That was never the plan. The plan was, we got to let him know that none of those other schools can offer what we offer, because not only can we offer the football now, not only can we offer, because you sit that kid down and you're like showing film of how dominant your D tackles have been the last 2 years. You're like, dude, you're bigger than Howard Cross is already. And he was an All-American last year. And he, you know, until his injury, he was a pretty good player this year. You know, those are things that you look at and you say, you've got a product to sell to him about what we've done with guys like you. And they did a good job of that, but also about, can you fit into the locker room? And that's always a question about some kids have. There's stereotypes about what Notre Dame is all about, the kind of kids that Notre Dame recruits. A lot of schools will negatively recruit against Notre Dame and the type of kid they get. But then you get on campus and you're like, these guys are dogs, man, just like me. And that was impactful for Tiki this weekend. And I think Notre Dame did a tremendous job of they are now because like you could be in a kid's top 5 and you're like, yeah, they're in top 5, but they're not getting that kid. This is a kid that you are now a player for him. Are they number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5? I don't know, but you are a player for him now. And that was the key coming out of this weekend. And now it's going to be about building on it. And, you know, he is one of their top interior targets. Their top edge target they're going to see today, by the way. They're going to see Samote Kotoanga, I think is my best version of saying his name. That dude is a monster at defensive end. They're going to do an in-home visit with him today. By the way, little recruiting nugget for you that put that on the board last night as well. They can do in-home visits now with recruits because of the rising current juniors, because of the way the calendars changed. That's one of the new rules this year. So Marcus Freeman, Al Washington, and I think Carter Allman, and I believe I think that Max Bulla might be with him. Let me check my notes here real quick. No, it's Max Bulla will not be with him. It'll be Al Washington, Marcus Freeman, and Carter Allman will all be doing an in-home visit with Kotoanga today. And that's a big one, a very big one. Now, they're not the only DNs on the board. There's a lot of other DNs on the board that they like a lot, but he is their top defensive end prospect on the board right now. He's a dude. And so they're going to do an in-home visit with him today. So yeah, he's the kind of guy you close on, and I mean that's a top 100 dude. That's a difference maker. So I like the board right now, especially with Tiki Hola, because I like where they are with edge players, especially after offering Ebenezer this weekend. You know, Rodney Dunham's a kid he's an interesting kid because you don't see many defensive end prospects or like big time baseball players. Rodney Dunham is. He's a really good baseball player. Yeah. I mean, when was the last time you saw Notre Dame use baseball to pitch a defensive end? You know, but he's a big-time baseball player. He's coming back from injury. He's on the board. There's actually some decent edge players on the board this year, but interior's really where Notre Dame's got to step up their game. and being able to go out and make a move on Tiki was big. Now it's about, can you follow it up? And that was a big one. And then, of course, at linebacker, Trev, they had some kids on campus this weekend. Now, Kenneth Goodwin didn't make it in this weekend, but Jacoby Clapper and Simeon Caldwell did. Jacoby Clapper is a really interesting player. I think Notre Dame's in a great place there. He's a kid from St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati. They've been on him a while. He's made multiple trips to campus. He's an interesting player. He's sort of like a top 200 to 250 caliber player. He's not the typical top 100 guy that Notre Dame often goes after, but I like why they're after him. I'll explain why in a second. Man, this is kicking my butt still, man. Had to pause and cough there real quick for those who aren't listening, who aren't watching. But he's not your typical like elite Madden, Drake Bowen, Jaden Ausberry, Kingston type of guy. He's the kind of kid that's going to need a couple years to develop, get bigger. He's not real big right now. I've seen him listen anywhere between like 195 to 205 pounds. He's kind of more of a will, maybe could play some rover, kind of a similar role on first and second down to Jalen Sneed. He doesn't have Jalen's twitchiness on third down to rush off the edge, but like the same first and second down role, some rover, some will type of thing. A little undersized like Jalen, taller than Jalen, not necessarily as long as Jalen, but you get what I'm saying? Like first and second down, similar role. Not similar athletes, but just similar role. But he's the kind of kid that you don't need to necessarily keep happy with playing time as a freshman. He's the kind of kid that's going to need some time to develop. He knows it, I think. He's the kind of kid that goes to Iowa, sits for 2 seasons. You don't hear from him, and then all of a sudden as a redshirt sophomore, he's like, wow, he's a good football player. And then as a redshirt junior, is like an all Big Ten guy. That's how I see Jacoby Clapper. And you need some guys like that sometimes, because if you recruit nothing but 5 stars every year, you can't keep everybody happy.
Right.
And he provides you some depth. I could see him becoming a really good special teams player early on in his career. Like he's the kind of guy Marty Biagi's going to love on special teams. I really like him. Somebody asked me, would you take him? And I said, yeah, I'd take him. Yeah, but he's not a big time player. No, he's not yet. Maybe he will be eventually. But he's smart. He's a good athlete. He's a hitter, despite the fact he's not very big. Like he plays a lot bigger than he is. Like, you know what I mean? Like the style of play, the physicality he plays with, he plays a lot bigger than he is. And as he gets older and stronger, he's gonna be a good football player. And then the other kid they had on campus this weekend, Trev, is Simeon Caldwell, who is a really interesting player. Now, Simeon is like a top 100 player. I think On3 has him as a top 50 guy. But the concern I don't say concern, but one of the questions that Notre Dame had for a while with him was, where's he going to play? Because early on in his career, Trev, he was more of a safety. And this year, Bowles, who's a big time program in Jacksonville, moved him down more to sort of like a linebacker-ish hybrid type of role this year, and he's really filled out to where now, like in the past, Trev, he was a safety body and a safety in high school that played more like a linebacker, but you didn't know, could he play linebacker at the next level? Did he have the size? But he's really filled out nicely this past year. But the thing I like is he's still every bit as athletic as he was. He's smooth. He's fluid. He's smart and instinctive. He can run. He plays against big-time competition. Like, you ask yourself, like, could he play linebacker? He answered that question this year, in my opinion. His change of direction I really love. His closing speed is excellent. He's more of like a rover will right now. I think, rover probably would where he'd play day one by that's based on where he is now as a high school junior. I imagine by the time he gets to Notre Dame, he's going to be more of a, rover will type of guy. Big time player, loves Notre Dame. The question was, is Notre Dame going to turn up the pressure on him the way they should? And my understanding is they are doing that they're really making a push for him. And so this weekend was big for that. It was about, look, this is a big-time player who's a big-time academic kid from a big-time program. It's got big-time schools after him. How serious are you about him? And Notre Dame made that known to him this weekend. You're a dude. We want you. Marcus Freeman's got a great relationship with him. He's doing a good job of closing there. I think Notre Dame did a great job with him. Now, he's a kid that's been high on Notre Dame. Brian Smith was down at a month or so ago. He was down at a camp where Simeon was at. And Brian, Brian's smart. Brian's a vet like I am. Like, you don't just rush up to a kid and start asking him a question. You hang back, let other people ask him questions. He already answers it. And then when you identify yourself as a Notre Dame guy, you see if he changes his tone or his answers or not. And so Brian doesn't really – he's not a Notre Dame guy. He doesn't cover Notre Dame, but he'll ask about Notre Dame. But he'll hang back and listen to a kid talk and answer questions first. And he said whenever other people were asking him questions, it was always Notre Dame was always the first school out of his mouth. Always. Kid loves Notre Dame. It's about – but can you convince him to come up north and play? And that's going to be the key. And I think they did a great job this weekend of really reminding him of what he can do. And I think the staff felt better seeing him in person, seeing how he's filled out. We're like, yeah, this kid can play linebacker for us. And so they're excited about that. I think he's a dude. I love this kid's film. I think he's smart. I think he's athletic. I think he's long. He's going to have no problem getting to be 225, 230, in my opinion, when it's all said and done. He reminds me a lot of the role Jack Kaiser played, but he's a lot longer, where just surprisingly how quick he is, his closing speed is. It's really smart. Jack can run. Simeon can run. Simeon's a lot longer than Jack is. He's at least an inch or two taller. He's got longer arms, a little bit more natural in coverage than Jack was, flipping his hips. And so I love this kid. I think Notre Dame did a great job of putting themselves in a position to where, if they continue doing what they're doing, I like where they are with Simeon Caldwell.
Simeon's film was really fun to watch too. Like you said it already, but I just wanted to highlight it again, man. His change of direction's awesome. When you combine that with the length that he has and his ability, like the thing that I always get really interested to see is when somebody in high school makes a transition from safety to linebacker, is like their ability to like fill in the box. You know what I mean? Because like you have some safeties that fly downhill, and you'll see high school coaches make them into linebackers because like, oh, well, he's a hard hitting safety, so like let's just put him inside. But he fills pretty well. Honestly, he tackles really well. Like you have some guys like that played the safety position that moved down to linebacker in high school, and like they just go for like the big like shoulder hit. He wraps up really well, tackles well in space.
He's so fundamentally sound, Trevor.
I know.
Which you really expect for a kid from Bowles, but you are correct. He's very sound fundamentally.
Which leaves a lot of room for excitement, especially considering he has to come back to high school for another year, right? So it's going to be really fun to watch him and what he's doing at the linebacker position. It was weird. Like they would line him up. There were a lot of plays on defense where they would line him up like underneath the safety, but behind the linebackers, which I thought was interesting.
Looks like a post-Rob alignment.
Right.
It's like Notre Dame will get to that post-snap. Yeah. They just kind of put him there.
they break the huddle, and that's just where he lines up. But it's because he's still good in coverage, right? There were a couple over the middle where he covered it well. His arms were long enough where he didn't have to wrap the waist to do anything crazy. Like it was good, promising film to watch, man. So no, I was really high on Simeon after watching the film as well. But speaking of film, Brian, there were three guys that we were going to highlight. We already talked about them. They're the wide receivers that were on campus. And it was Connor Salmon, and it was Jaden Finley. I'm sorry. It was Braden Robinson and Kadon Finley. And so excited to dive into their film, man, and watch it with you and watch it with the rest of the people in the chat, because I watched it by myself in my office yesterday, and it was exciting to see. As thrilled as Lauren was to watch high school juniors fly around the football field yesterday, I'm sure there'll be a little bit more appreciation for it in the chat today. But their film's exciting to watch, man. It's really fun.
Trev, obviously, as you mentioned, we'll go Connor Salmon first. We'll go Braden Robinson second and Kadon Finley third. And I'm essentially looking at it from left to right. Essentially, if I lined up an 11 personnel, deuce right alignment, I'd have with each I'd have Connor as my vertical boundary guy, which we'll talk about. We'll have Braden Robinson as my slot, and then Kadon Finley as my field X receiver. And Connor Salmon, as we're going to talk about, is a very unique player. And I mean, he can play X. I mean, he could play Z, excuse me. Keep forgetting Notre Dame used to call the Z the X and the boundary the W. Now Mike Denbrock's to traditional X is the boundary, Z is the field. But he could play Z, no question. The reason I like him as a boundary guy, just my personal opinion, is because I like boundary guys that are stretch the field, vertical, one-on-one type of players, and that's exactly what he is, which we'll be diving into here in a minute. Also, as we get into film, guys, if you have some mailbag questions you want us to answer, go ahead and throw those in now, and we'll get to those because we will have a mailbag here at the end. So let's bring up Connor's film, and we'll talk about it. The first thing y'all are going to see here when you start looking at Connor's film is you're going to see a guy that can flat out fly. Let's go here. Let's see more of him and less of us. How about that? How does that sound? I think that sounds great.
Works for me, man.
But that's the thing is you're going to see is this is a young man that can flat out fly. Can everybody see that? Just make sure that everybody can see that here real quick. This is a kid that can flat out run. And Notre Dame, what is one thing that we know for a fact that Notre Dame needs more of in their offense, and that is speed. He's a Northern Virginia kid. Here you see him in the slot and just can go. Just outrunning the defense. Plays against good competition. His speed is different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is a vertically oriented, off the line, just eat you. I mean, just look how quickly he gets on top of this cornerback. This is eating up the cushion in a hurry. Nice long strides off the line. Eats up the competition really in a hurry and just boom over the top. Look at that, though. This is one thing that I really liked is he plays the ball in the air very well. Go ahead, Trev.
I was going to say he tracks the ball extremely well. Very well. And
look at that. He's going inside the hash. Quarterback throws the ball outside properly, actually. I think the quarterback, if the quarterback throws it over top where Connor was kind of headed, it's a tougher angle to get that ball thrown. He throws it up over the hash, and he tracks it very well and makes a very clean catch. So this is a really impressive play. Sticks his hands out, makes the catch. This is kind of what he does. Just runs really fast and catches the ball very well. Great concentration there, but just look how quickly he gets off the line.
Mm-hmm.
He really explodes off the line.
Yeah. He's
got tons of speed.
After this clip, I'm pretty sure they show it from the other angle to show the contested catch that he made. Yeah.
Great concentration there with that kind of coverage. Again, Trev, I mean, there's not a lot here other than just speed. Meaning that came out wrong. There's like a lot to talk about, but like you don't have to go very far beyond speed to love this kid is what I'm trying to say. Yep. The speed alone makes him a guy you want to have. And then you add in the other things, and that's what makes him, to me, a top 100 player. He's not ranked as a top 100 player by nationally, but he is by Brian Driscoll because he does have those other attributes. Look at that. Even this, he actually catches this ball away from his body.
Yep.
He doesn't extend it, but he does. And then look at the ability to make people miss it. He's not a tight-hipped vertical guy where he can't do anything but run vertical. He can do things after the catch, but he goes from 0 to 100 in a hurry. Even like his motions are fast. Like he even looks fast when he's going in motion, Trevor. Like this kid's a game changer in my opinion. Like he's a pure game changer.
Yeah, man. I mean, his acceleration off the line's fantastic on that slant play where he broke the tackle. I mean, the linebacker that was in pursuit of him had the angle, and he outran the angle from almost a dead stop. Yeah. I mean, this is a fast kid. Fast kid, tracks the ball well, high points it relatively well, makes good contested catches. He has soft hands too. I mean, the film's very promising. Pretty decent route runner too for being a junior in high school. That's always my fear. And I said the same thing about Braden Robinson in the notes that I had. You always kind of wonder how fast kids are going to do in route running because in high school, a lot of times you just kind of blow by kids, and Salmon's a pretty good route runner for his age, right?
He's got a good foundation.
Yeah.
He's got a good foundation to work with, no question. And nice ball tracking. There's a lot to like about this kid.
They have a play call in here where they motion him in the same and then they run a whip. Yep, there it is.
There you go. Reverse pivot. Love it. Love it.
Jeez.
Plays defense, a little bit of defense.
Yeah.
Why
Takes us back to the crib. I was about to say. Man. Yeah, his speed's on display. Put it back at safety, let him go up in high point. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can see it. This kid can absolutely fly. Absolutely fly. And he's listed at 6'1", 190. That's close. He seems a tad taller than that to me. Trevor, just kind of seen him around other prospects, but, 6'1", 190, strong kid. Again, can play other positions, but I just love him in the boundary for what Mike Denbrock likes to do. Like, you think about some of the things he did last year, like Brian Thomas in the boundary. I'm not saying Connor is Brian Thomas. What I'm saying is there were things you could do with Brian Thomas you couldn't do with Bo Collins and Jaden Thomas because they don't have the same kind of just take the top off speed that you'll be able to do with Connor Solomon, the way you will be able to do with Malachi Fields and guys like that. And that's why I like him in the boundary. Just a guy that can just do some of those things. But he's not a guy you have to just line up there and leave him there all day. Because as I broke down when Mike Denbrock was hired, he moved Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas around all year last year. Yeah, they had a starting point of where they were, but they moved them around a ton. I've seen Brian Thomas catch slot fades. I've seen Malik Neighbors catch slot fades. I saw Chris Hilton catch slot fades. They would move guys around and plan this. But this right here, catching the hitch and then squaring guys up, making people miss, that stuff is translatable to me. And he brings a lot of that to the table. And this play right here, Notre Dame, get the ball in the outside arm, son. But this is something that Notre Dame did a lot of with their boundary guy. Now, this is him doing it in the field, right? But they did this with Bo Collins a lot this year. Bo Collins caught more of these little tunnel now screens than anybody else on the roster. And that's what I think this kid does. So I think there's a lot of what he does really translates well to the boundary position that Notre Dame, how Notre Dame uses the boundary position. But I also love the fact that Mike Denbrock doesn't just stick people into the boundary and that's all they do. And can I say something else? If you're a receiver and you want to impress me, put blocking highlights on your film.
Yes.
Like, that tells me something about you, that you're you know what I mean? Like, I was talking with somebody yesterday and you start talking about Chris Mitchell and didn't have the year that he had, but, goes out into the national championship game and he's playing well. But, like, what's the biggest play he made? It wasn't a catch. It was him blocking 25 yards downfield after Jaden Greathouse just made Caleb Downs look silly. And that's the difference between a 25-yard gain that gives them first and goal against the second best red zone defense of college football, or a 34-yard touchdown. That team player type of thing. And I don't know why you'd kick to this kid.
I was about to say kicking to him was a choice.
Yeah, this is not a great one. Not a great one.
Yeah, another thing I like about him, too, is he gets his shoulder square really quickly when he catches those now screens, which I appreciate. I mean, he's going to be a fun player to watch.
Yes, no matter where he goes. And hopefully he ends up at Notre Dame. As we talked about earlier, I think Notre Dame's definitely one of the top schools for him, but there's a lot of closing to be done with him, Trevor. There's definitely a lot of closing to be done. That's Connor Solomon, guys. You see the film. Very, very impressive player. Next, we're going to move on to Braden Robinson. We talked about him before. He is from Red Oak High School in Texas. His dad is actually his high school football coach. So he's you understand, okay, I said before, this is a smart kid. He knows how to play. He's not just a fast kid, but he's a smart kid. He's a high academic kid. And you're like, oh, that makes sense since his dad is his high school football coach. So he's a coach's son, which means he's a thinker, not just a fast guy. He's not just some guy that ran track and the high school football coach went and said, hey, son, why don't you come out and play football?
Right.
He's a kid that also has a mind for the game. So I like that about him for sure. So let's dive into some film here of Braden Robinson, Trevor, and you guys will get a sense. Again, he's a guy that you don't need to see many clips on to get a feel for how good this kid can play. It probably helps if I hit play. And usually that helps it go. The other thing, too, is I think all three of the kids we're going to evaluate were all over 1,000 yards receiving last year. These aren't just talented kids that you got to hopefully can become receivers. These are all kids that not only have big-time talent, but they're established. They are proved. The production is proven, and he only put his receiving stats. But as you're going to see here, he makes an impact beyond just catching the football
He's
in the offense. Yeah. He's listed at 5'9", and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever you say, buddy.
He's 5'9" the same way I'm 6'2".
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I was 6'1.5", 190 on my recruiting film, on my recruiting tips. I'm not even 6'1" in cleats. But they don't need to know that. So about him, Trev, like you mentioned, it's not just about the speed, right? This is a kid that knows how to track the ball down the field. He knows how to run routes. This is a nice post right here. Some things I'd say, hey, give me a little bit more of an outside stem, but he does lean him a little bit at the top. I just want a little bit more. Don't make that post route just yet. Eat up the cushion a little bit more. But when you're that fast, you can get away with that. But this is a kid that knows how to play, Trev. He's not just a burner. He's also a kid that knows how to play. He's really quick in space, as you'd expect. Tracks the ball well. As you mentioned earlier, knows how to run routes. He's not just a speed guy.
Right.
Like see him sink his hips just a little bit more there, but that's good quickness getting out of those breaks. And then once he gets the ball in space, you're like, uh-oh. He turns into a running back once he gets the ball in his hands.
Yep.
He's got a receiver's game without the ball, and then he immediately turns into a running back when he gets the ball. I love that move, by the way.
Yep. No, he's very skilled with the ball in his hands. He's really quick after the catch. Like there's a little bit of like Golden Tate in him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like just he's a very, very dynamic player after the catch.
Yeah, he's got some CJ Sanders in him too as a return guy, slot guy too. If you remember how dynamic CJ was as a returner at Notre Dame, he's got some of that in him as well.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not just a returner who can play offense, kind of like Jane Harrison was. He's more of a receiver that can also return, and I like that. I definitely like that. He's a strong kid too.
Yeah,
Trev, when you look at him and he's not just a little skinny guy that's going to get wrecked if he gets caught. Like love the body control there, by the way.
Yep.
Nice little seam route. He goes where he's supposed to be. That ball's got to get bent inside of the safety. Safety's off. Quarterback gets a little bit behind him. But I like how he settles into that zone. He doesn't. If he keeps running as fast as he can right now, he's going to run into the safety. He clears the first level. He sees the safeties are bailing. This is probably like a late game situation. He throttles in that window and gives the quarterback a target and then makes a good catch. Look at him just accelerate out of that break. Nice back. This is not a well-thrown ball.
No.
This should be a touchdown just off of natural, clean catch and run. But he makes a tough catch, breaks a tackle, and then he scores. Should not have been this difficult of a touchdown. But he made the play. It's a really impressive kid.
Gosh.
See what I'm saying? Like, that's strength.
Yeah.
That's not just quickness. I mean, quickness helps, but that's also strength and great balance. Just really exceptional balance when he's got the ball in his hands and is a route runner. Another really nice catch that he makes here. This kid's a talented football player, Trev.
Yeah.
Very talented football player.
Yeah, like I said before, the thing that I really like about him, that's a nice contested catch. The thing that I said about him that I really, really appreciate is his ability to run pretty good routes, honestly, for being a fast guy, because you do see that quite a bit in high schools. They just rely on their speed to blow by people, and he definitely utilizes his quickness, obviously, like he should, but the route running is pretty good.
Yep. A lot to like there, Trev. And the rest of the highlights, just a lot of this. Ooh, I like that move. Little slot fade, nice contested catch, good body control. You don't see a lot of 5'9", wink, wink guys making back shoulder catches in the end zone like he does. Like, look at that quick. That's some suddenness right there. That corner thinks he's running the fade, just drops the hip, snaps it back downhill, then makes a tough catch. Makes a lot of contested catches for a little guy, and you love that because you can't just in college. I don't care how fast you are. You're not always going to be wide open,
right?
You've got to be able to make plays in space. You've got to be able to make contested catches. I mean, I'm not expecting to go, out jump Leonard Moore for a slot fade. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you're going to have to be contested, win contested balls. You're going to have to make catches in traffic, and he does that. He does that. I don't like when receivers leave their feet like that, but he makes the catch. Nice job working backside here. Gets to the football. Nice low catch. It's a lot of talent here, Trev. Needs to work on the spin there a little bit. The ball spin, wasn't quite crisp. I want to see a little bit, work on that celebration a little bit more. This is something I hope Notre Dame does a lot more of with some of their receivers next year's, some of the screen game stuff, which they didn't really have the personnel for this year as much as maybe we would like. But he is that kind of guy. There's no question.
I would like to see him and Leonard Moore in a foot race.
Yeah, no doubt. They would look different. Look at that, just acceleration. I wonder if he fumbled here. I think he might have fumbled there, cut it out. You know what I mean? Because you see that club, and then all of a sudden the highlight gets cut off. I think he might have fumbled that one, and they didn't want to show it on the highlight. Yeah. Just really dynamic speed, game-changing speed. You can see why Notre Dame's so high on him. But again, he knows how to play. It's not just landing a burner. Look at this, finding that, getting vertical, just finding that inside zone, doesn't go screaming inside to the linebacker. As soon as then he clears, then it's get to the open zone, catch the football, then re-accelerate, get downfield for a big play. He's a good football player. Really good football player. Look at that. Love that. And then here's the part. Okay, this is nice, but it's this. Boom. Re-accelerates like that. That's what separates the good players from the great players with the ball. Is you can make that move, but how quickly can you get back to top speed once you make that move? This kid does. That is not an easy catch for anybody, much less a 5'9" guy. I'm not going to keep doing that every time we talk about him. He's not 5'9", but he's just, I don't care. He's special.
No, he's dynamic with the ball in his hands, man.
Yeah. So that is Braden Robinson.
So moving forward, we're getting ready to pull up Caden Finley's film, and he's another dynamic receiver from Texas. He's a 4-star kid. He's a top 100 player, right, Brian, by some outlets. And so you look at him on his On3 profile, he's listed at 6'2", 195, and you guys are going to see it in the film. But some of the stuff that I like seeing about him, man, is, he has great high point ability. He has a really big catch radius. And which is something that's going to be really evident on film. But he's not bad after the catch either, honestly, for being a...
Yeah, we talk about different types, right? He is more of that guy that's going to do great work before and up to the catch point, where Braden Robinson does great work before and after. Connor Solomon does his best work after, with that speed. And this we talk about different guys. Like Jaden Greathouse can do things after the catch, but what makes him special is his ability, what he can do to get open to make the catch. And Caden's got a lot of that in him as well. So we'll check the film. And he's another guy, 1,000-yard receiver in high school, which, again, I like that. I like guys that can run. So let's check out Caden Finley here real quick. And you guys are going to see very polished, good athlete, right? Like a lot of times you say polished, you automatically think a guy that can't run. He's not the burner the other two kids are. Not even close. He's a completely different type of player, but he's a good athlete. Good feet, smooth. You can see him kind of in space. You see really good foot quickness when he's getting in and out of breaks. He's got nice hips. You can sink his hips as a route runner. Knows how to get open. Knows how to manipulate receivers. Tough kid at the catch point. Yeah, great block there. His second highlight on film was a block. That's going to win me over, Trev. This kid knows how to get to me. Nice little jet sweep. Don't know that you're going to be doing a ton of that with him at Notre Dame with other guys, but look at the ability to kind of make that guy miss, get vertical, find the opening. It's just another example of a kid that has that high football IQ, knows how to win, knows how to get open. There's a lot to like. Initially he's thinking I'm blocking down, quick recognition. That guy's gone. Let me go get vertical and then make a block, drive that guy out of bounds and pancake him. Right. Like, we've seen 5 plays of this kid. 2 of them are him, blocking somebody, dominating somebody.
Yep.
And those are things you like to see. Look at that balance, that ability to make guys miss. Again, he's not the same kind of after the catch guy that Braden Robinson is, but he's not a slouch after the catch either. This is the stuff I love, the body control, the extension, right? Like a little bit more of a better route there, but man, that's great body control, great hand-eye coordination, tracks the ball very well, knows how to get open. I was looking at this at first, Trevor, and I'm thinking, what is going on with their field? Like, is it wet there? Oh. And then eventually I figured out it's the state of Texas.
Yeah.
But it took me a second.
It's too big.
Yeah.
Like,
I had to look at it, and it was like, what is going on? Their field is jacked up. And then, yeah. Like, only state I've ever been to where I went to a hotel and the waffle maker literally make waffles in the shape of the state of Texas. Again, this is not great speed, but he's good speed. But look how quickly he comes off the line, though. This is better urgency than we see from some of Notre Dame's current receivers.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, look at the urgency he comes off with. I got to eat up that cushion, get over top of the guy, tracks the ball very well. I like that kind of stuff, man. Like, yeah, okay, let's say he's a 4.55, 4.6. I don't know if that's accurate, but he plays that way right now. Right. I mean, he gets to that top speed right now. So again, he's no slouch, and he's probably faster than 4.6. I'm just making the point, right? But he knows how to play. He knows how to play to his full speed. You see him playing a lot of slot here in high school. I like him there. He could play there. I also like, and that's why we compared him to Jaden Greathouse. But I also really like him as that Z position where he can be a really good route runner at Notre Dame. Because a lot of stuff he does in the slot here is stuff that Notre Dame asks their Z to do.
Yeah.
But he's a guy with some positional flexibility. They run a lot of verts that requires him to just read the coverage and get open. Again, I'd like to see him push the lever, push the cushion a little bit more here before he bends it. But look at the body control. Look at the concentration with him when that ball. I mean, that DB actually plays that ball pretty well.
Yeah.
It's a really nice ball by the quarterback to drive it low, and then he just goes and makes a great catch on it. He's a really good football player, man. His dad is Jermichael Finley, as I mentioned earlier. So obviously he's got good schooling. His dad was an NFL tight end for a long time. You see this route. I'd like to see him sell the vertical just a little bit more off the line, but look, nice outcut, slanting out kind of deal. Good route there. Really good. I mean, really clean hands, Trev. Like, doesn't fight the ball. It's a phenomenal catch. You know, just you see it where he's just a natural pass catcher. It's just like catching a football is something that's just like easy to him.
Yep. Very soft hands, does a good job tracking the ball, great job at making contested catches. And like that's this part of the highlight film. This is the one that I got to, and it was, which was something that at points throughout the season, Notre Dame's receivers didn't do a great job of doing. It came back on late in the season, but making contested catches wasn't something that Notre Dame's receivers did a whole lot of. And so watching this kid do it his junior year of high school, it leaves you a lot of room for promise.
Like, look at him level off there once he gets behind the linebacker. That's just smart football play right there. You don't keep drifting. You don't know what's behind you. You make that safety have to go as far as possible. Lets him get some more yards after the catch. Here he is playing outside. As I said, you see him inside and outside. He can do both. Another contested catch. I'd like to see him high point. Like, that's one of those ones to say, try to go up more. Explode up more. But again, it's great concentration. He makes the catch. And he seems to take a lot of pride in dominating people. And that's when you know you've got a guy that understands it. Being a great receiver is all of it. Yeah, it's not a bad catch right there either. Look how smooth he is, though, Trev. Like, and again, see, like super twitching, explosive? No. Look how smooth he is. Look at him find this open spot. Like, he's just vertical. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to cut outside here, and I'm going to score. And he plays against outstanding competition. You know, I mean, just really, really outstanding competition. Nice little, I mean, this is easy. He's coming off vertical. Looks like that his first couple steps look like a go route, right? Cornerback bails, and then he's like, okay, let me just snap it off here, find that open zone, and then boom, maximize my yardage potential on this play.
Yeah. Acceleration was pretty good there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Tough.
Gracious.
All three of these kids are strong, but especially the two Texas kids. Like, you really see it with them, just the strength with the ball in their hands, and then obviously his blockers. I wonder what that kid said about him before the game. It sems like that kid
I was just about to
might have done a little something to him because he took that a little personally. Yeah. But those are the three receivers that we looked at, Trev, that Notre Dame had on campus this weekend. If you want to watch more, his sophomore film is also pretty good. Wore a different number then, but a lot of the same stuff. I mean, his sophomore film is really impressive as well. Good sized kid. Lot to like, man. You guys see it in the film. These are three very different football players. Like, none of them, there's different things they can all do, but not like Caden Finley is not very similar. Is not at all similar to Braden Robinson, but there's things they both can do similarly. He's not similar to Connor Solomon, but there's things that they can do similarly. Same with Connor and Braden. They're three very different football players that combine together to make a very good receiving core if you got all three of them. And then you throw Dylan Faison in the mix, who's also really good. Brian Smith was down at he was at the, I think, Battle Miami a week or two ago, and he's kept texting me, man, Dylan Faison's the real deal. And Brian doesn't really get impressed like that. I mean, it takes a lot to get him that fired up about a guy because, Brian's been doing this a long time, but just kept raving about him and Thomas Davis. He was impressed with what he saw from Thomas Davis Jr. as well at that camp too. So, yeah, you got to but here's the thing. They were in position with some guys early last year, like Dalen McCutcheon and some guys like that. And Caden Finley, to me, is an example of this offensive staff not making the same mistake twice. Because they slow played Dalen McCutcheon last year because they focused more on guys that had more quote-unquote talent or speed. A guy like Derek Meadows instead of a guy like Dalen McCutcheon. Dalen McCutcheon is not a burner. He's an outstanding wide receiver, though, and highly productive, very good football player. And they made the mistake. They passed on him and went after guys that were a little bit more athletically gifted. And this year they're doing both. And a guy like Caden Finley is the kind of guy like a year ago, maybe the recruiting coordinator and offensive staff, maybe they would have slow played more. But I love the fact that Mike Brown and is like, no, we need guys like this. Yes, we need Braden Robinsons. Yes, we need the Connor Solomons, but we absolutely need kids like this too. Because this is the kid that makes that play on 3rd and 5 like Jaden Greathouse made multiple times this season against A&M, against Penn State. Like, he'll make those plays. But he can also, like Jaden Greathouse isn't just going to go run go routes by people all day. But he can make plays, but it's the contested back shoulder he made against Penn State. It's things like that you're like, that's the kind of stuff. The contested back shoulder catch he made against Georgia Tech. That's the kind of stuff where, no, it doesn't require you to be like a burner type of guy, but those are big-time football plays you need. But on 3rd and 5, that's where you're looking for. And that's what Caden Finley brings to the table. That's what Jaden Greathouse brings to the table. And you need guys like that. And that's why I love how these three kids complement each other. So when there's other receivers on the board, like I know Naeem Burrows is a guy that the staff is still very much looking at. We're not saying these are the top 3 guys on the board. Trent Mosley is a guy that they're definitely still looking at. They'll get him on campus again. We're just talking about these 3 guys because they were on campus this weekend. And we'll eventually break down film of Naeem Burrows and Trent Mosley when they get back on campus again as well. But I love the receiver board. It's not real big, so you need to close. But I love the receiver board so far, Trevor. Like, you give me any 5 of the Connor, Braden Robinson, Caden Finley, Trent Mosley, and Naeem Burrows. You give me any 3 of those 5, any 2 of those 5, and this is a really good receiver class to go with Dylan Faison. You give me any 3 of those 5, and this is an outstanding receiver class. And that's just not me. I mean, that's recruiting rankings feel that way. The offer lists tell you that. And I'm telling you that because of how I evaluate the film. So whatever metric you like to use, this is an outstanding receiver class if they can get 3 of those 5 guys to go with a guy like Dylan Faison. So, yeah, closing time is in front of you now, Trevor, if you're Notre Dame. And there's a lot of work to be done here over the next 4 or 5 months. But they're putting themselves in position to where they're in a good spot with all those guys. It's just about closing the deal. And that's what we're going to find out if they can do that or not. But I love the early board.
And hopefully they can, because obviously the film speaks for itself. The offer list speaks for itself, and the talent's definitely there. So it's going to be exciting to see how this unfolds over the next 4 to 6 months. And hopefully some of them will find homes in South Bend, right? So, Look, guys, that's going to do it for the recruiting hour. It's going to do it for film, but don't go anywhere. We do still have a mailbag that we're going to get to. Again, we're going to be doing a mailbag for about an hour, and we're going to be covering some of the questions that you all have. This isn't specific to just the message boards, unlike Buy, Sell, Hold. This is for the people that are in the live chat and that have been watching with us. So before we get there, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and share this podcast with your friends and family. And, of course, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, it's mailbag time. And it sounds like this is something that Irish Breakdown did. I remember back when I was a listener.
Yeah. We used to do them every day. We would
Yeah.
talk about a topic or two, and then we do mailbags, and they would go on forever. And today was a bit of a long show because we had a lot of different topics we had to go over, but they won't normally be quite as long. But yeah, we'll go for about an hour, and it's gonna be fun. Super chats always get moved to the top, and so speaking of, we have a couple of those here to start off with, Trev.
Super chat from Brian Richmond. Thank you, Brian. No real question, just being supportive. I don't want BD taking that nil money from Ohio State and making a page called Bucknuts Breakdown or the Lions Den for Penn State.
Okay, first of all, I would never name something Bucknuts, and I would never use the word Diddy in anything because I'm not even going to go there. But listen, I cannot be bought. I am running a Notre Dame channel. If we do things beyond Notre Dame, which we will do, like CFB Nation, the Notre Dame channel will always be the number one. It will always be in my heart. So, yes, I cannot be bought. If you know what I mean. If somebody's like, "Hey, we'll pay you $1 million to, so you don't do Irish Breakdown anymore. We don't want to," and like, all right, cool. I'm gonna start something else that's going to be breaking down Notre Dame film. So, and breaking down Notre Dame's team. So I have a price that if somebody wants to buy the name, they can buy the name, but it'd have to be a very, very heavy price. It wouldn't even be $1 million. I've already turned down bigger offers than that, but it would have to be, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. But everybody has their price, but I'm covering Notre Dame football until I'm not breathing anymore. So you don't have to worry about that, buddy. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much.
Super chat from Gene McDonald. Thank you, Gene. Brian, good to see you on the mend and sounding better, man. Thank you for everything you and the IB team do. Go Irish.
I'm glad you think I sound better because I think I sound like crap. And I keep talking, but I'm getting more of the deep voice now that we've been talking for so long. But yeah, it's more now. It's like I think my cough now, Trevor. I have a little bit of buildup, but I think my cough now is just because I did so much damage to my esophagus and throat area that I think it's just more of like a reflexive, like responsive cough because of that.
Oh, that's the worst. That's the worst part about a dry cough is you just get like that random tickle that just doesn't go away for like 15 seconds. That's kills me every time. Kills me every time.
Yep. So, Gene, thank you for your super chat, man. I appreciate that very much.
Another super chat from Super Mario Henry. Thank you for the super chat. Anything on tight end recruiting?
No, not a whole lot than what I put on the board a few weeks ago. They're very early in that stage. They're still evaluating guys. There's a couple guys on the board, but I think we'll see some movement over the next few months. I think they're going to get out and see some guys, try to get some guys on campus, and then figure out what they like. It's not a great tight end class so far from what I can tell, so I think they're trying to figure out who the guys that they like and who are the fits. Like I know they're after Brock Harris, but they're way behind on him. They're not even in his top 6. They're still talking to him. He still talks to them, but obviously a lot of work to be done there. But yeah, it's not a whole lot on that one. Wish I had more for you to give super chat, but just not a whole lot there.
All righty. That'll do it for the super chats. Once again, if you guys do want your question bumped to the top, we do respond to super chats first. But now on to some of the mailbag questions from Aiden Benami. Thoughts on Knowles leaving for Penn State? For that little of a difference in money, too, I would be beyond mad if Golden left to be a defensive coordinator at Scum or anywhere else for that matter. LOL.
Yeah, I think it had more to do with just not wanting to be at Ohio State anymore and wanting to get a payday. I don't think Jim Knowles – I mean, I don't think Jim Knowles had any like feeling of loyalty to Ohio State. It's like he got hired to do a job. He did the job really well, and he wants to be paid like it. So, I mean, the chat asked about, Notre Dame offered him $3 million, and then he took 3 point. I mean, it was a money grab for him. That was basically what it was. I don't know how serious the interest really was there. But, he did some good things. He's, he was at Duke for a while, did a good job. He was at Oklahoma State for 4 years. I've heard you hear all the different rumors about, he wanted to be more of a 3 down and Ohio State wanted to be a 4 down. I mean, I don't know how much of that is true. There's so much stuff out there that's just not accurate at all about why, he's going to go to Oklahoma because his fiance is from there. Somebody just said he went to Penn State because he's from Philly. I think he went to Penn State because he gets full control over the defense and he got paid a crap load of money. I think that's really what it boiled down to. And look, you're 59 years old. You're trying to, your stock is never going to be higher. And you cashed in, right? But this is why I don't have a lot of sympathy for coaches who talk about loyalty, because don't get mad at players when they leave because they're getting offered more money when you do the same exact thing. That's kind of part of it. It's an unfortunate part of the way the business is done. But I mean, it's a great hire for Penn State. I mean, it's an upgrade. I like Tom Allen a lot. I said before the season, I thought that was a big hire. If you remember, Trev, one of the reasons I was higher on this Penn State team this year than I have been on past teams is not because their talent was any different. It's the same players they had last year.
Yeah.
I thought they made two great coordinator hires. Well, you lose Tom Allen, who went closer to home. I mean, he was making Tom Allen didn't make a money move. Tom Allen I'm a grandpa, and I want to be closer to my daughters and my grandchildren who were in the Carolinas. I got nothing but respect for that. And I think he fits in culturally with what Dabo is, just how you treat players and that type of thing, and your faith and all that kind of stuff. I think he fits really well with what Dabo is trying to do. And, so I don't think that one was a money grab per se. This one was. I don't think this is because he's from Philly. I think this is just, it's a better opportunity for him. I think he didn't want to beat Ohio State. I think that's part of it. And then you play the system to get the money you wanted. But I don't think it's just a money grab, but that's a part of it. I mean, it's a part of it. As far as who he picked, it is. But I don't know that him leaving Ohio State was just a money grab. I think that was more of just, we're not saying it's good or bad. I just think he wanted out and didn't want to be there anymore. So, but I think it's a strong hire for Penn State. He's a very good football. He was a great coach, did a great job at Oklahoma State, did a great job at Duke. He's a really good football coach, and he'll do a great job at Penn State. So, yeah, can't
right.
Second straight really strong hire in a row and actually, I mean, Manny Diaz was a good hire. I'm not as high on Manny Diaz as a coordinator as some people are, but he's a good coach. He's made 3 really good. Actually, and who was his D coordinator before that? Who was Penn State's defensive coordinator in 2000? See, and Manny Diaz is 22 and 23, right? Brent Pry. Okay, that's who it was. Who's now the head coach at Virginia Tech. So, and then before Brent Pry, he had Tim Banks on staff, who's now the D coordinator at Tennessee. So, I mean, he's hired some pretty good defensive minds at Penn State. That hasn't been their problem. He had Brent Pry and Tim Banks on staff together for 4 years. That's a pretty good job. So he's done a nice job there. And this will be another really good, strong hire.
Super chat from Michael S. Thank you, Michael, for the super chat. If Ash is the guy, what does this mean for Mickens and his continued coaching at Notre Dame?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I have some concerns. I mean, we've talked in the past that Mike Mickens' goals is to be a defensive coordinator and eventually head coach. That's also Dylan McCullough's role, eventual goal. And, as an outsider looking in, I don't know what kind of message this sends to Mike Mickens. Now, here's what we don't know, that, maybe Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman have talked and they're this and they're on the same page, and who knows, right? But I mean, he was the pass game coordinator the last 2 years, and what has fueled the defense the last 2 years? Their coverage structure, what they do defensively on the back end, their secondary. And that's why they have a top 2 to 3 pass defense each of the last 2 years. And so it's I mean, if not now, when? Right? I mean, what else do you need to prove? He doesn't have experience being a coordinator. Well, he's the same age Marcus Freeman was when he got hired as the head coach of Notre Dame with no experience. And the transition from DB coach and pass game coordinator to D coordinator is a lot more normal and natural than the other. But, for whatever reason, and I don't know those reasons because I don't talk to Marcus Freeman. He won't return. He wouldn't return any of my calls if I tried to call him and figure it out. But I don't know the reasons why, but he clearly has a reason why he doesn't think Mike Mickens is ready to lead this defense. And so I don't know what that means for Mike Mickens. I don't know if that means he's going to leave this offseason. I don't know if he's going to leave next offseason. I don't know if he's perfectly happy with where things are, and so you got to kind of let it play out a little bit. But if this move happens along with losing Mike Mickens, that's crushing because there's a lot of positions where you can like, hey, there's, like let's say Al Washington, who I think has done a nice job the last 2 years of the defensive line. Let's say he left. I'd be like, you know what? There's some other really good D-line coaches out there. You can go out. If Mike Mickens leaves, I don't know that there's a better DB coach that you're going to be able to go get. So to me, you will have downgraded a D coordinator and downgraded a DB coach. That's a concern for me. And Chris Ash does have a good reputation as a DB coach, but I don't think he's as good as Mike Mickens. And that's my concern. And if you lose the Mike Mickens influence as far as from a coverage standpoint, then does Chris Ash then do more of what he likes to do, which is not what Notre Dame is recruited for? These are all questions we don't have answers to. And so anything beyond that, what I just told you, I mean, it's all speculation. We don't know. I share with you my thoughts and my concerns, but we don't know the answers to that. And I guess we'll find out here over the next couple months. If Mike Mickens leaves, then we'll know he wasn't happy about it. If he stays, we'll know that he was accepted it in some capacity and he's ready to rock and roll and help Notre Dame go out and win a championship next year. We'll find out. I truly don't know the answer to what he's going to do.
Super chat from Phil Haig. Thank you for the super chat, Phil. What's the mistreating players that Ash was accused of at Rutgers? And is it true he has already talked to Mickens?
I don't know about that. I did not accuse him of that. What I have said is he has a reputation for just in general being kind of a dick and not being not getting along well with people around him. That's different than mistreating someone. You know what I mean? Like there's being rude and then there's mistreating someone. I don't know of anything that involves. So I'm not even touching that. I've seen people mention this. I'm not familiar with it. I've heard a couple allegations. I don't have any proof, and I don't like throwing those things out there because I've been accused of things that are completely false. And so I'm just nothing like this. I mean, just like, silly things that have to do with doing this job. But I don't even want to talk to that. And like, just because I don't like the hire, I'm not going to try to slander this dude as a human being about things that I don't have knowledge of. I do have knowledge of how his interpersonal skills are when it comes to dealing with other people. I do have knowledge of that, and I'll speak to that. That's a whole different type of allegation than he mistreated players. That's a different animal that if you're going to talk about that, you better have some concrete stuff to discuss, because now you're talking about trying to sabotage a dude's entire career. And I just don't know. Maybe true, may not. I don't know. So I'm just long way of saying I'm not really touching that one. Is it true I ought to talk to Mickens? I mean, look, I think John Bryce reported that. If John reported that, I believe it. I do, from what I've understood, there have been some conversations. They haven't been very extensive from what I've heard so far. So we'll see what the next step is. But no, they have not had any sort of, oh yeah, we're going to work great together. Let's do, as far as I know, that they have been very, the conversations have been very general so far. Now that might have changed today. I don't know, but that's what I've heard.
Super chat from Andrew Burke. Thank you, Andrew. Bryan and Trev, who are your top 2 or 3 external defensive coordinator candidates?
Well, I mean, I'm Jim Leonard is one. I would have tried to do whatever I could to make that happen. But a guy that I've always been very high on is Joe Rossi, who's at Michigan State. I think he's an excellent coach. Did a great job at Minnesota as well. I'm high on him. I mean, there's other guys out there. Those are 2 guys that I know that they looked at last year. I would have made a call to DeAnton Lynn. Honestly, from at USC, I would have tried to see if what his thoughts were and where he was going. But I mean, that was kind of but honestly, Trevor didn't even have a lot of time to kind of get into who your top candidates might be. The names started kind of coming out so fast. I mean, we started hearing about Leonard and Rossi right away. And, I would have at least, I mean, if this was me driving this process, I would have at least wanted to have a conversation with the guy at Indiana. Just, hey, let's talk. What are your thoughts? I don't know that he would have had the experience that would have made me like, hey, we got to go make that hire. I think Indiana did a great job this year. They're a very well-coached defense. They weren't necessarily challenged to a phenomenal degree. this season. But some of the top defenses out there, Trev, those guys are already on the move. Obviously, you have Tom Allen and Jim Knowles. They made a run at Jim Knowles, obviously, which I still believe he kind of had a little bit more of a say in that, kind of looking at it. But, there's some really good defensive coordinators out there. A guy that would not have been on my list now, but I've got my eye on the next time is the guy at Northern Illinois, Nick Bennett. I think it's Nick. Let me look it up real quick. It's Nick. Give me a second real quick. Nick Benedetto. I loved Northern Illinois' defense. They were a top 15 defense in a ton of different categories, and they're not that talented. They are very experienced, but not that talented. He's an up-and-comer that's not on my radar now, but I think could be getting some Power 5 jobs here in the next couple of years to keep an eye on. He was one of the guys that I kind of came across, but outside of that, Trev, here's part of the problem is I don't follow the NFL. And if I'm in Marcus Freeman's shoes, and if I was advising Marcus Freeman, one of the things I would do is I say, you need to keep your eye open for some guys that are at that next level. Some up and comers like what Michigan did with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter, who actually had some college defensive experience. But like those kind of guys I would have taken a look at, because not just because it worked for Al Golden, but more so the style of play that Notre Dame goes with, the sub packages, the man defense, the different things that they do. There's a lot of
like parity
carryover from what they do. That's why I think Al Golden worked so much. So I would have opened up to those, but I don't know who those guys would have been. That's my thing, is that's why I'm like, it's got to be Mike Mickens or I'm going to be pissed. I said my piece on who I thought it should be, but I don't have enough knowledge of other guys out there to say, well, there's nobody except Mike Mickens that'll be the guy. I think there's good coaches out there. Somebody mentioned Anthony Weaver. I don't know where he's at anymore. He used to be the D coordinator for the Texans, but that's what I would have looked at.
Yeah, one of the guys that I really liked was Joe Witt Jr. He's the now defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. Okay. And he was like the defensive pass game coordinator and the secondaries coach for the Cowboys the previous 2 seasons, when they had Deron Bland broke, I think, Trayvon Diggs' interception record in the season or something like that in back-to-back years. So I think there's translatable things. I thought the Commanders had a good defense this year too. And so he would have been somebody that would have been on the top of my list, but I'm kind of more in line with Bryan. It felt like the news broke, and full transparency, I was honestly still kind of licking my wounds from losing the national championship. Honestly, I really was. And so it was, the news about Al Golden broke, and, it didn't take long for that to kind of happen and be set in stone. But a candidate was named 72 hours after the news of him leaving. And so it just didn't, I didn't have enough time to formulate who. I thought Jim Knowles was a cool thought, but I think it was, to what Bryan said, I think it was more on Knowles's end than it was Notre Dame's. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. But if you were looking in the NFL, somebody like him, I don't think would have been a bad choice.
And I don't know that you could have got a defensive coordinator from the NFL. That would have been pricey. But a pass game coordinator, a linebackers coach like an Al Golden, somebody that works with a top D coordinator, also look at that. So I just would have taken a bit more time to find a better fit. I just don't know why you needed to speed it up this quickly, unless he just, just this is who he wanted to do. I just have to think that this is just who Marcus wanted. I don't think he panicked. I don't think this is a panic move because he got turned down by Jim Leonard and, Jim Knowles. I hope not. I just think this is just kind of the direction he wanted to go. And I hope he's right. I have major reservations. I don't think this is a good move. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. There's nothing about his last 5 to 7 years of coaching football that makes me think this is a guy that's built for success. They had really good defenses. And that was the same argument people made about Brian Van Gorder about the defenses he had a decade before at Georgia. College football is very different now than it was when he was coaching in 14 and 15 at Ohio State. Everybody does what Oregon does now. I mean, it's just so different now than it was back then. Just because let's not forget, in 2012 and 2013, Bob Diaco was one of the best coordinators in college football. Bob Diaco's had a hard time getting a defensive coordinator job. Why? Because he struggled to adjust to the modern game. He struggled to adjust to the spread, tempo type of stuff. I do believe he just got hired. I think he got hired by Bill Belichick at North Carolina as a position coach. I think he's the new linebackers coach at Purdue, I believe, or North Carolina. I thought he was at LSU as a linebackers coach, but he hasn't been he was a defensive coordinator for a year at Purdue. Before that, he was a defensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech, and he was a defensive coordinator for a year at Nebraska. All disasters after he got fired at UConn as the head coach. Why? Because the game has changed and he didn't adapt well to it. I don't know that Chris Ash is going to have the same problem, but I'm saying is like what you did 10 years ago doesn't have a whole lot of relevancy for me now. And that was my question about Al Golden. But with Al Golden, you could kind of point to but look what he's done the last couple of years as the linebackers coach for the AFC champions. And that's kind of made it a little bit of a difference. But yeah, it's a major question mark. I would say this. I hope that Marcus Freeman is right and I'm wrong. But on the face of it, there's not a lot to be excited about. I think you have to do a lot of spin to convince yourself this is a good hire. You have to do a lot of spin to convince yourself this is a good hire. And I've seen people try to do it, but whenever you throw any context into the conversation, it just kind of eliminates that spin.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't mean that he won't be a great hire. All right. We don't know. I can only evaluate what I know. And what I know is it doesn't make me very happy. But I hope I'm wrong. Very much hope I'm wrong. And I've been wrong before. I have a pretty good track record of, liking or not liking certain hires that worked out well. But I'm not perfect. And I hope this is one of those times where I'm definitely not perfect and I'm wrong. Very much hope that. Very, very much hope that.
All righty. Mailbag question in here from Red Bearded Eagle. Over under on the number of eventual commitments for junior day.
Boy. Oh, man. I mean, I don't ever love doing those, and I really don't like doing it now in this NIL era where things change so quickly. But I'll just say this. Honestly, I'd set the over-under at 6.5 at least, maybe 7.5 if I was trying to set it for a number. That's what I would do based on where things are right now. There's closing that needs to be done, but that's where I'd set the number right now.
Love it.
We had a little mailbag bomb from Salty.
All righty. Have Notre Dame and Chad Bowden issued statements regarding his move to USC? If not, had something in the relationship soured?
Notre Dame has not released anything, which I find odd. Chad did, and USC did, and people took it as a shot at Notre Dame. He just said, "Hey, it's excited to be at USC. They've got the resources, whatever, to compete for championship." I did not take that the same way that Brian Kelly made it seem like Notre Dame didn't have certain resources and USC and LSU did. I didn't take it that way. Some people did. It is what it is. But had the relationship soured? I don't know. And there's a lot of rumors going around, and people love to – this is what Notre Dame does. Every time a coach leaves or they force a guy out or a guy leaves on their own, all of a sudden you hear all these rumors about he did this wrong and that wrong, and that's just kind of been Notre Dame's way for long before Marcus Freeman is here. And I have a pretty good idea of who the people are that spread those rumors that have been around that entire time. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But I don't know that I do though know this. Notre Dame chose not to match the offer that he was given. It was almost $1 million. I mean, Chad was making, from what I'm told, $300,000 at Notre Dame. And I was told last night the final offer from USC was like $1.3 million. It's a big, big amount. Now, the debate of how far does $1.3 million go in California compared to That's for Chad Bowden to figure out. That has nothing to do with Notre Dame. $1.3 million from Notre Dame is still $1.3 million. And I don't know that there was a burning desire to match that. And I honestly don't blame them for that. That's a lot of money to be thrown at a GM, especially one who I think needs to be more focused on the recruiting part and not the overall running of the roster part. That's my thing. And I'm as big of a Chad Bowden supporter as there is. I don't believe I would have matched if I was Marcus Freeman. And I think that's as much to do with it than anything about, like, do I think Marcus Freeman had some disagreements with how the 2025 class got put together? I do believe that to be the case. I know a couple assistants had some issues with how things were done, where guys were take commitments from guys that position coaches didn't want to take commitments from, that later got dropped. I know there were some issues there. There were some issues about why aren't we targeting? Like, I know that Mike Brown gets all the blame for receiver recruiting, but I know there's some guys that Mike Brown wanted and didn't want, and Mike Denbrock wanted but didn't want, but the recruiting staff, Chad, wanted or didn't want, and that ultimately was the direction they went. So there were some disagreements there, but that's always going to happen to a degree. I think it just really came down to he wanted a certain amount of money and certain type of things Notre Dame wasn't willing to give him, and he left. And I believe that Marcus Freeman believes that moving forward, there need to be some different directions on how they do certain things. And, wish Chad the best. But I do think there would have been some changes to how they did things this season in recruiting. We already started to see that, where they weren't taking as many early commitments as they have in the past. So certainly some changes were going to happen, and there were some disagreements on how things went. But that's different. People take that stuff and then turn it into Marcus was ready for him to be done. I don't believe that to be the case. I think Notre Dame was willing to engage in Chad about giving him more money to keep him here. But they were so far apart, and the number that USC gave was so outrageous that I think it was just kind of like, we love you. We appreciate all you did. Best of luck at USC. I think that's more of what it had to do with, in my view, based on some of the things I've heard, but also just trying to connect the dots.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a business decision on both sides. I mean, look, we spent the first part of the show talking about how this job needs to be split into two. I think Notre Dame also probably believed a little bit of that. And so do you bring back one guy for essentially the price of being able to hire two people, or do you just make a business decision? It always turns into, a lot of fan bases do it. Like it turns into different coping mechanisms of like, they have to justify why people left. I mean,
right. He wasn't that good anyway. It wasn't that big of a loss.
Right. Ohio State Twitter was in shambles after Jim Knowles left. I mean, just, wasn't the conversation on January 20th, but it definitely was couple days after he decided to leave.
So, I haven't even seen any of that stuff where he sucks. He wasn't that good. Yeah.
There was an account that I saw that was just putting out like highlight films, but it was satirical. And it was like Jim Knowles appreciation. And it was just like Ohio State defenders like getting cooked. So yeah.
Yeah. You just won the national championship with the number one ranked defense in college football, but sure. Tell yourself it wasn't because of the defensive coordinator.
Super chat from Andrew Burke. Thank you, Andrew. Following up on your comment, Brian, what coordinator or position coach hire were you most wrong about, either liking it and then it bombed or vice versa?
Let's see here. I was right about John Tenuta. Was right about Charlie Molnar. I was very uncertain of Chuck Martin working out because he had spent so much time on defense. I loved Chuck Martin as a coach. Loved him on the defensive staff. And I was like, this dude was your D coordinator at Grand Valley. He's your DB coach, and he's going to be your quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator. I'm not sure about that one. So it wasn't that I didn't like him. It was uncertainty. Now, I wasn't covering the team when that move was made. I made that decision more of a fan. But that's Chuck Martin showed that he can coach anything. That couple seasons he was there. I was right about Brian Van Gorder. Let's see here. I was right about Elko, Chip Long. I thought that Jared Parker, they scored a lot of points last year. I thought Jared Parker would be in a better position to lead the offense than he was. So I was wrong about that. He actually schematically did better things than I thought he would do. But being the leader of the offense, he was far less effective than I thought he would be. because he had done things like that before. He was the interim head coach at Purdue, and I thought he'd be better able to take control of the room than he was. And so I was wrong about that part of it. I talked about my concerns with Al Golden. I was wrong. Not that I was wrong, but those concerns were alleviated. They ended up turning out to be not necessarily warranted. I think some of the positions I'd say I've been wrong is more position coaches. I thought Del Alexander was going to be a really good hire. Because he had a really good track record at different schools. Like, it was Arizona State. He was in the Big Ten. I think he was at Wisconsin. Had a really good track record as a recruiter and as a position coach. I thought that was a really strong hire. It turned out to be a terrible hire. It's more so those type of hires that I was wrong about. I've been pretty good with the coordinator hires, especially recently, to be honest with you. But I hope that I'm wrong on this one. I don't know that any of them bombed. And anybody that would have bombed, I think we all would have had concerns about. Like, I did not like the John Tenuta hire. I did not like the Brian Van Gorder hire. Those guys bombed. You could argue Jared Parker wasn't good enough, but the guy still had the number one scoring offense in the history of Notre Dame football last year. They didn't suck. You know what I mean? Like, him and Brian Van Gorder and him and Charlie Molnar don't belong in the same sentence.
Right.
Other than unless you're contrasting one being good, one sucking.
Totally.
So, that'd be more along those lines.
The only one that I was dead wrong about was Tommy Rees. I thought he was going to be terrible, and he wasn't.
I don't understand why Notre Dame fans don't have such a negative opinion on Tommy Rees. It's like everybody on the planet thinks Tommy Rees is a smart football guy except for Notre Dame fans. It's the oddest thing. It really is the oddest thing. Whatever. Okay.
Another one from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Are you hearing anything that suggests additional coaches may leave for other opportunities?
I am, but I don't know that any of it is definite or certain. I mean, you're always going to hear that this time of year. And it's not abnormal to hear that this time of year. Some of them I think are rumors that I don't necessarily buy. Some of them I do think have a little bit of legs to them. I think we've seen Notre Dame coaches leave in February, especially there's a couple coaches that I think might have the NFL in view. And that won't happen till February. So, but I could see where nobody else leaves, but I won't be shocked if another coach or two leaves this offseason. Won't be shocked.
Got another one in here from Red Bearded Eagle. Is the move to hire Ash being made because the bigger name candidates were not open to Mickens being co-DC? It's the only thing I can seem to grasp at to make this make sense.
No, that's not a reason why anyone else might have turned Notre Dame down. No. My understanding is there was no giant push to where you have to accept Mike Mickens as a co-DC. I have not heard that from anybody. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying I haven't heard that. I don't believe that to be true. I don't know that they pushed for anybody besides Leonard and Knowles. I don't know that they went after Joe Rossi. I don't know if they went after Bryant Haynes. I don't know if they went after anybody else. I just think Knowles reached out to them. They talked. They offered. He turned it down, took Penn State. I do believe there was conversation with Jim Leonard. They didn't apparently go anywhere. And then I just think he turned to Chris Ash. I don't think there was a process beyond that. I don't see how there could have been time for a process beyond that. That's where I think it's going. That's where I think it went. I don't think he got turned down by a lot of bigger name guys. I think he got turned down by two. One, I don't think they were surprised by. I don't think they even went into this process thinking Jim Knowles was going to be a candidate. His agent is Chris Ash's agent, so it would have been easy to know who he is and what he makes and what the demands would be and all that other kind of stuff. So that salary is going to be interesting. Like, if he gets anything close to what Al Golden is making, I would be shocked. I mean, I'll be very disappointed because the market, if the market was strong for Chris Ash to be a D coordinator, we would have heard his name mentioned before Notre Dame.
Right.
And we didn't.
Right.
So that'll be very interesting.
Baldpeen Shillelagh. How did Saban at Bama go through so many coordinators and still reach such dominance? Seems any other program with jumping coordinators nosedives. Absolutely incredible what he built there.
Well, I mean, there wasn't. If you look at the stretches where they had a lot of turnover, that's when Alabama wasn't winning as much. I mean, when you look at the stretch, like their best stretch was 09 to 12. I mean, they won 3 titles in that period of time. That was their best stretch. Well, I know they had different offensive coordinators during that period of time. You know, it was Jim McElwain in 09 and 10 and 11, and then 12, they had Doug Nussmeier. So 3 titles in 4 years. You had 2 offensive coordinators. Your defensive coordinator for all those years was the same exact dude. It was Kirby Smart. They had the same coordinators in 13. Then in 14, you bring in Lane Kiffin, and Kirby's still your coordinator. And then Lane Kiffin's there in 15, and he in 16, and you're still same coordinator. It's not till 16 that he had to hire a new defensive coordinator. And so you had the title that they won. So 9, 11, 12, 15, they won 4 titles in 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 4 titles in 7 years. They had the same offensive coordinator same defensive coordinator for all those teams. They had different offensive coordinators, but defensive there was stability there. Then in 16, you started to see more turnover on both spots. So you had Jeremy Pruitt was your D coordinator in 16, and then in 17 you had Kiffin and Sark were your coordinators in 16. In 17, it was Brian Dable and Mike Loxley. 2018, it's Mike Loxley and Josh Gaddis, but Mike Loxley was running the offense. In 19, it was Sark. He came in 19 and 20. But Sark's running a very similar offense to what Lane Kiffin ran. And then you bring in Bill O'Brien in 21. You bring in 22. And then, of course, in 23, it's Tommy Rees. You started to see a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball after Kirby left, and they had some years where there were some not great hires. 17, obviously, he had Jeremy Pruitt, and Tosh Leopold was his defensive coordinator. And then in 2018, Tosh kind of takes over as the primary defensive coordinator, and Pete Golding comes in as co-coordinator. Things don't go well. Guess what? Tosh is out. And then it's Pete Golding and Charles Kelly, and they were together for 2, 3, 4 years until Pete Golding got forced out and they brought in Kevin Steele. So, I mean, there wasn't the turnover that you think, and part of the turnover was when guys failed, Saban quickly moved on from them. So he knew real quick Tosh ain't the guy and moved on from them. But when there started to be more turnover, they had less success. So 4 titles in the first 7 years, and then so that was 9, 11, 12. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. His last 8 years, they won a title in 17 and 20. 2 titles in his last 8 years. Now, that's still a lot, but that was off of his greatness, and then they were a machine at that point in time from a recruiting standpoint. I mean, that's what it came down to. So they didn't have as much success once they started having to replace coordinators on both sides of the ball. Their greatest level of consistency came when they had the same defensive coordinator every single year. There was one side of the ball that you always knew Alabama was going to be great at. And then what happened during that last 8 years? They weren't as good on defense, right? Because they kept having to, he made some bad hires. I still said I don't think Pete Golding's a great defensive coordinator. It's good. But like Pete Golding is a good comparison for Chris Ash. Good defensive coordinator, can have a certain level of success if you got the talent, but not good enough to necessarily be the reason why you win a championship. Pete Golding was a coordinator on a championship team. But, Trev, it was not necessarily they didn't win the title in 2020 because Pete Golding of the job Pete Golding did.
Right.
They did that because they scored almost 50 points a game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they won the SEC title game giving up over 40 points.
Yep. Yep.
So a little bit of a different deal on that team.
I was about to say that wasn't
was more about
Pete
Sark.
Golding.
Right.
That's because Devontae Smith put on the Superman cape
Right.
for 15 or however many games they ended up playing, 13, 14.
Yeah, and Mac Jones was insane that year, but that was because of the job that Sark did, not the job that Pete Golding did.
Agreed.
And Charles Kelly did. So, but I also don't necessarily agree that other programs nosedive. They'll have some ups and downs, but like Clemson hasn't nosedived with their, but they've had a hard time replacing Brent Venables. Let's be honest about that. But they're still a team that wins 10 plus games every year. I mean, like, that's the best nosedive I've ever seen in my life. They're not the same program, but they're still a very good football team. Won 10 games this year, won 11 games 2 years ago. I think they went 9-4 in last year, right? Like that's their quote unquote down years, a 9-4 season where they beat Notre Dame. So, Georgia has still been good, even though they lost Todd Monken. They've still been good. That meant as good. I mean, so I don't know. I'd say they nosedive. I just think that they're not quite as good when they've lost certain coordinators. But it's all about the foundation of that was already established that you're able to keep building on is really what it comes down to.
Agreed. Yeah. It's a standard that Saban set out. And he hired according to that. So,
yep. There was a question from AST that was about the Mike Mickens aspect of it. We kind of already addressed that. AST, that's the only reason I'm not bringing up your question, but thank you for putting that up.
Mailbag question in from Carrie Later. Assuming that we are still under the Freeman defensive system, was Golden's more similar to this than Ash's, or does it kind of not matter if it's still Freeman's system?
Well, it matters because, it's a very good question. The reason I hear this a lot, like Marcus Freeman was running Al Golden's Al Golden was running Marcus Freeman's defense. That's not accurate. Al Golden adapted certain personnel to what was, terminology based on what was already there. But the reason Marcus Freeman hired Al Golden is because Al Golden's philosophy and belief was in line with Marcus Freeman's. That's what a good coach does. He doesn't hire someone and say, okay, now you run my defense or my offense. You've never run it before. You have beliefs that aren't like mine, but you're going to run my offense. To use a very dramatic example, I'm not going to go hire the best triple option offensive coordinator out there and say, okay, now come run my pro style offense and expect him in year one to be as good. That's his expertise, is that. And now I'm going to ask him to say, yeah, but I'm going to ask you to do something different. If what that guy did warranted you getting hired, and you let him run your offense. But what smart coaches do is they will hire people whose philosophy is in line with what we've recruited here and what we believe in here and the principles that are already established. He may have a different package of this, or he makes this play call. He likes this on third down, but the overall structure is the same. And to me, that's what Coach Freeman needs to do. I don't know that Chris Ash is that way. That's what I'm saying. The one great unknown is we don't know, because all the great coaches adapt over time to how the game changes. I mean, if you go look at the offense that Nick Saban believed in when they won their first 4 titles, it looked a whole lot different than the offense he used for his second 2 titles, especially the one in 2020. Very different, because he evolved in certain ways. Good coaches will do that. Bob Diaco was not able to do that. He had a belief in what he believed in on defense and the 3-4 defense and what he learned under Hayden Fry. And as the game evolved, he couldn't adapt. We don't know, because he hasn't been a coordinator, how Chris Ash's belief in defense has evolved in the last 4 years as he's been in the NFL. I don't know that it has or hasn't. I truly don't. That's the thing that gives me internal hope. And it's me kind of talking myself into it to a degree, that he's been in the NFL. He came back with a, you know what, like, this is where college football is going. You can do these type of things now. I never really believed we could do that because I didn't have cover 1 corners at Wisconsin. I didn't have cover 1 corners at Arkansas. Ohio State, he did, but still, I mean, it was a different game then. Offenses were different then. The Big Ten was different then. There wasn't the need to be playing cover 1 all the time in 2014 in the Big Ten. All the teams you were playing were running football teams. That's my hope. That's my hope, is that his philosophy has evolved to more of what the modern defenses use, which is sub packages, playing more man coverage, being more versatile with your blitz schemes. That's my hope, is that he's evolved. And now he's more in line with what Marcus Freeman believes in. I hope it's not, well, this is what I believe, but sure, I'll run your defense, because that's not going to work at all. So that's where I'm at. But I also don't want to pretend like coaches don't evolve, because they do. Go watch what Al Golden did on defense at Virginia in 2005, and you're going to be like, I don't recognize any of that crap, because the game was different. Right. And that stuff, that 3-4 stuff worked back then. You can't run that now. So that's the thing, is it's evolved. It's evolved. But it was Al Golden's defense.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yep.
It's just him and Freeman are of like mind in a lot of ways. And that's was part of the brilliance of hiring Al Golden, was hire someone that believes in what you believe in, and then let him go coach.
Yep. And
then you keep being the head coach. And that's what Marcus Freeman did. And it was smart.
Mm-hmm.
It was smart. I hope he makes an equally good decision this time. I just have more doubts.
Question in here from Ronnie Reeves. How likely is it that no top defensive coordinators, Mickens included, wanted to follow in Golden's much like following Saban, and that's why Freeman went with Ash?
I think we're looking for justifications for why Marcus Freeman chose to go with Chris Ash. That's what I think we're doing. No true I mean, Jim Knowles, like, well, he's going to a team that was in the Final Four last year. No competitor is going to be that way. I mean, Kalen DeBoer chose to replace Nick Saban. No competitor is going to be that way. It's going to be like, look, they got close. You let me go there and we can take this thing over the top. That's what the top best coaches are going to want to do.
Right.
I don't think anyone's afraid to follow Al Golden, especially with the way they played on defense in the championship game.
I mean, honestly, yeah, like if you're an ultimate competitor, you look at that and be like, oh, with those pieces, I could have done things differently. That is exactly
with Marcus Freeman recruiting.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is coming down the pipeline on offense.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got Gray and Moore and Boubacar and Drake Bowen and Kingston and all these young talent. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Salty Virginia Peanuts. How close is Notre Dame to closing the gap?
Very. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we're going to discuss once the staff is fully in place. One of the shows we'll do is where has Notre Dame closed the gap? And then another show will be where is there still work to be done? Maybe a segment. We'll hopefully have that show either probably next week, depending on if certain things happen next couple of days. Because I don't know that the Chris Ash hire will be announced very quickly. Because remember, Notre Dame usually takes a while to do all the background checks and the paperwork and all that kind of stuff before the hire it gets announced. So I don't know when they're going to announce it, if that is the direction that they end up going. But we'll have that show. But just kind of briefly, I mean, your quarterback, I think talent-wise, you've closed the gap. Now production's got to be there. Your running back room is as good as anybody in the country. Your linebacker room, talent-wise, is as good as anybody in the country. Your cornerback room is as good as anybody in the country. Your safety room is really good. It's not the best, but it's really good. You're getting closer to being there. And the young talent you got bringing in Jadon Blair and Brandon Logan this year, and then Bronte Johnson last year, and Kennedy Urlacher, and some of the guys that you're looking at. But those are things that you're getting closer there. Your D-line still needs some work, recruiting-wise. Your O-line needs work development-wise. It's close, but it's taken a step back because of some of the injuries and the uncertainty and things like that. But you're a one good offseason away from being right back there. Talent-wise, I'd say that they've closed the gap. I mean, there's still – the talent's there. It's just a development thing. Receiving core, you're not as far away as people think, but that's an area where you still need work for sure. There's no doubt. Tight end room, you're championship level in the tight end room. It's got to play better. They're not that far off. And I think the title game showed that. There's areas where Okay, you're not as good as that. But like everybody's talking, well, they can't win because they don't have a receiver like Jeremiah Smith. Hate to break it to you, but the most productive receiver in the national championship game played for Notre Dame. Yep. So yeah. I'm not saying he's as good as Jeremiah Smith, but I'm saying, like, you didn't lose that game because you're receivers.
Look, here's how I think about this. There's no one recipe to winning a national championship. There's not, because like you could go back through and you could look at any past winner and say, well, if you don't have this, you're not winning a national championship. But the one thing, and I've said this in shows before, the one thing that is a constant is being able to run the football and having a good defense. No matter who had fantastic receivers or great offensive minds or aired out quarterbacks or first round one lottery pick wide receivers, every team that's won the national championship has been able to run the football and they had good defense.
Mm-hmm.
But mind you, all good football teams are able to run the football and have a pretty good defense, right? Like, so it's just that's not a recipe for success strictly for national championship teams. Like in 2020, teams weren't looking at it and saying, well, in order to win a national championship, we have to go get a Jamar Chase and a Justin Jefferson and a Joe Burrow, right? After 2020, they weren't like, well, we need a Devontae Smith to win a national championship. It's not like that, you know? And so I'm with you. I'm not in that boat either.
Yep.
Super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. How much pressure do you think is on Dan Lanning at Oregon due to Marcus Freeman taking his team to the national championship?
I think a lot. I mean, I think the way that they got beat by Ohio State in the playoff kind of, it's like, wow. Like, you had a pretty good team. You're the number one team in the country. You hadn't lost a game, and you guys got smacked. You know, and before this year, it was like, okay, Dan Lanning was who Marcus Freeman is. I mean, you weren't even the best third-year coach that was hired the same offseason that you were hired, Marcus Freeman. Well, now he is, I think, you know, because he's had more success than what Dan Lanning had winning those big games. So, I mean, I think there is. I mean, at some point in time, it's like, hey, Dan Lanning, what have you got to show for, you know, all the money we're spending in recruiting? Okay, yeah, you're winning a lot of regular season games, but what do you really have to show for it? Kalen DeBoer owns you. You know, like Ryan Day just smacked you in the mouth. I mean, what is your claim to fame right now? Hey, we beat Liberty and we beat Ohio State by a point in the regular season at our place, where we had to run 12 guys on the field to win the game. And then they blew us out in the playoff. I mean, what's his claim to fame right now? Yeah, you beat Penn State in the Big Ten title game. All right, cool. You're a good football coach. But when are you going to take that next step? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on him over the next couple of years. He needs to get to that stage. No question. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. And I think Marcus Freeman, to Tyler's point, Marcus Freeman getting his team there, a team that is not perceived to have the same resources that Oregon has, it's perception. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's a good amount of pressure on him. You know, I mean, it's winning the Big Ten in your first year in conference, I do think is notable. I do. I mean, going undefeated in the regular season, I think is notable. But it's being able to win that big game is what's really have to turn the corner, and that's what's going to be on, I guess, on the docket for Dan Lanning next. And then after watching Freeman's success in the postseason, I think is very much amplified that pressure on him, especially with the talent that they had on offense, right? Yeah, I mean, you go from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel, and you have all these receivers, and yeah, I mean, I think pressure's up there. That's for sure. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Smeagol decided his precious is not to be found at Florida State. Is that program in irrecoverable freefall?
That's hilarious, by the way, that he said that. So obviously, Brady Smeagol, 2026 quarterback, decommitted from Florida State this weekend. I know that Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell visited him and tried to convince him that, no, you fit but he knows I don't fit that offense. Gus Malzahn can say all he wants about changing his system. Gus Malzahn runs the same freaking offense he's always run, and he will run the same. I mean, guy, just look at some of the decisions he's made at quarterback in the past. You know, he is going to win with Nick Marshall type quarterbacks. That's just what Gus is going to do. And you can convince the kid all you want, but when he gets there, you're going to run your offense, and he's not going to fit it. And you're going to find some athletic guy that can't throw that will fit it, and then he'll transfer somewhere else. This kid was smart enough to realize that. Him and his family were smart enough to realize, I don't fit that offense. And Mike Norvell can try all he wants to bring in Gus Malzahn to run a different offense, but why? Why would you bring in a guy that veteran and ask him to change what he does? No, you're asking him to come in because you're going to lean harder into the Jordan Travis type of quarterback, and that's what they're going to do. I mean, look at who they went and got in the portal. Thomas Castellanos. It's a 5'11" quarterback that ran for over 1,000 yards. And you're going to try to tell that kid that, no, we're going to change our offense to fit your style? No, this kid was smart. He's smart and realized that, no, that's not going to happen. And now he's going to look for a system that better fits his talent. So that's my 2 cents on that. Are they an irrecoverable free fall? No. They might be under Mike Norvell. I don't know if Mike Norvell is going to be able to turn it around. Sometimes, no matter how good of a coach you are, Trev, you just hit a point where it's too broken. I can't fix it. I think they're there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think Mike Norvell has done all that he can for that program. You don't go from 13-1 to 2-10 without some serious issues. And I don't know what that turnaround is going to look like for them in 2025. I mean, I'll just call a spade a spade. It's definitely not competing for a spot in the playoffs. I think it's becoming bowl eligible, and then going from there. So, yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what happens with Florida State. They're going to be a team that I'm monitoring, not closely, just for the fear of I don't know what there is to monitor closely, if I'm just being completely honest. But, yeah, I mean, it's tough because I do like Mike Norvell. I do think that the downfall of Florida State should be studied from going from 13-1 to 2-10 because that's crazy. But, yeah, I'm with you there, Brian. I think Mike Norvell might have done all that he can down in Tallahassee.
I've never seen a fall this dramatic.
It's crazy.
Way worse than in 2016, Notre Dame had a giant free fall, but they went 4-8, which was terrible. Still 2 wins better than Florida State did, but they were in almost every game.
Yeah.
I mean, USC was the one game they kind of got whooped, but that was close until Dory Jackson had like a pick six and a punt return, I think, right before halftime.
Yeah,
If I remember correctly.
He scored in all 3 phases.
Yeah, and that kind of broke the game open and made it 24-7. But that all happened in the last 2 minutes of the half. I mean, it was 10-7, and Adoree took a punt return back with 55 seconds left in the half. Or a minute 24 left in the half. 55. They made it 17-7. And then on 2 plays later, Deshaun Kaiser throws a pick six, and that broke the game open. But Notre Dame then still made it a 10-point game. But that was the one game where they got whooped pretty good. They battled, but they got whooped pretty good in that game. The rest of their games that year, Trev, were all games they could have won. Yeah. I think the one game that was not as close as the final score was the Michigan State game. I mean, that was an 8-point loss. That was they had a chance at the end, but they got outplayed that game. Texas, they lost in overtime. They blew a 14-0 lead against Duke. NC State beat them by a touchdown, and their only touchdown was a blocked punt return. Stanford beat them 17-10. Navy beat them by a point. Virginia Tech beat them by 3. I mean, they were in almost every game except for like 1 or 2. Florida State wasn't even competitive in most of the games they played this year.
No.
Like, they were competitive against Georgia Tech, and they were competitive against a little bit against Boston College. But, like, for the most part, Trev, I mean, Florida State this year was just getting absolutely blown out. I mean, just getting blown out. And even some of the games that were not overly okay, they got blown out by BC by 15. Memphis game was an 8-point game, but they scored late in the game to make it an 8-point game. It wasn't really close. SMU blew them out. Clemson blew them out. They lost to Duke 23-16, but you and I talked about at the time, they were never had a shot to win that football game. That was not a game that they had a shot to win.
No.
At any point in time. They got blown out by Miami. They got blown out by North Carolina. They got blown out by Notre Dame. They got blown out by Florida. And honestly, one of their 2 wins, they got lucky. They should not have beat Cal. They got lucky in that game. Like, I've never seen this big of a drop-off in my life. It was the wildest thing.
That Duke game was nuts. 3 turnovers on 3 consecutive plays. Like, that's so crazy. That is, oh, man. That was a bad game.
Yeah. Let's do one more, Trev. Let me see if there's any other new ones that came in that would be good. I don't see any MBs here, so let's just get one more from Salty.
All right,
and somebody's talking about Oregon said they won the Big Ten, but nobody really cares about conference championships anymore. It's what did you do in the postseason? Great, you beat. We said that. You beat Penn State in the Big Ten title game. Like, do you think that's what Phil Knight and all those boosters are giving them money to do? As long as you win the Big Ten, we're happy. No, they're trying to get a national championship. They're trying to win big games, and that's what he hasn't done to the level that you need to. It's not a disaster. They've won 11 games or more every year, but when you pay the kind of money they're paying to put rosters together, you don't say, "Oh, great, we won the Big Ten and got bounced by a blowout in our first playoff game." They're not going to be happy about that at all. If they would have lost a close battle back and forth to Ohio State, I think they'd have been like, "Look, man, it's hard to win a rematch." They got trounced by Ohio State. Trounced. And he got owned by Kalen DeBoer at Washington. Couldn't beat him. So I think you're getting to the point now where if he doesn't start winning some big games, more big games, especially in the postseason, you're going to start to see hey man, it's a little bit of pressure, like not firing pressure, but just like where it's like, okay, you get a little bit annoyed, kind of like what Ryan Day went through this year. It's like, hey man, how long until we're going to actually start winning some of these games?
Yeah,
well, that's kind of the key. All right, let's get one more. Let's see here. And actually, let me see here. Salty, we'll get to the one about spring practice here in one of our shows. Let's get to let's see here. It's Chris Ash. Let's do this one here. We'll end with this one.
All righty. Salty Virginia Peanuts, take us home. Ranking these linebackers in order of effectiveness during the playoffs: Ausberry, Bowen, Viliamu Asa.
Bowen 1. Ausberry 2, although I think he had more struggles, but he actually played in all the playoff games.
Yeah.
And then I'd say Kingston 3. Kingston had the nice sack against Penn State, late in the game, but he didn't play against Indiana. He was limited on snaps against Georgia. He was better in the final 2. Jaden had some plays where he definitely got beat, but he also had some good plays too. I'd probably rank him in that order. That's how I would go with him.
Yeah, I'm Bowen 1, and then I'll hear out either one for Viliamu Asa or Ausberry. Like Ausberry's mistakes in the playoffs started to become a little bit more glaring, which was tough, which frustrated us because he played so well in the regular season. Not that his performance in the playoffs takes away from what he did in the regular season, but he was one of Notre Dame's most sure tacklers in the regular season in space, and he just wasn't that in the postseason. And then Viliamu Asa just didn't play a lot, unfortunately.
Right.
So
he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Like this linebacking core next year is going to be outstanding. Yeah. And you think about it, I still don't understand why there's this little weird contingent of Notre Dame fans that just think Drake Bowen's not good. Was he a star? No, he's a really good football player. But he was a sophomore. Jaden's a sophomore. Kingston's a freshman.
Yeah.
Jaden Ausberry's a redshirt sophomore. Like this, and you bring in this linebacking core is going to be awesome next year. was pretty good this year. It's going to be awesome next year.
Yep.
Like awesome.
Oh, it's going to be fun. They're going to be a fun group to watch, man. I mean, for me with Drake Bowen, it's just like his progression from Texas A&M to where they ended the season. I mean, he went from looking lost at times against Texas A&M on the defensive call to physically grabbing people and moving them into the right spot, calling the right play right before the offense snaps it because they audible, and then going and making the stop himself.
Yeah.
Like, look, if the only way that you evaluate good linebacker play is like Manti getting 7 interceptions in a season or a highlight reel hit every year, then we're just not going to see that.
And Drake has got to get better next year.
Totally.
But again, he's a sophomore who played his first meaningful linebacker snaps this year. You're going to have some ups and downs, but for the most part, he's good. And the second half of the year, he was really good. So I don't know. Somebody told me that there's somebody that covers the team that just constantly bangs on him. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe that's Jade's. I don't know. I don't listen to other people, but he's a really good football player. Jaden Osborne's a really good football player. Kingston's a really good football player. Jalen Sneed became a really good football player late in the year.
Yep,
he did. Yeah. So
linebacker group is going to be fun to watch next year.
Yep.
Really fun to watch.
I love when people say, let's be honest, and then they give their opinion. Like, if you don't agree with them, you're not being honest. That's literally one of the most annoying things ever. It's like, look, you have your opinion of a player. I have my opinion of a player. Me not agreeing with you doesn't make me dishonest, and you not agreeing with me doesn't make me dishonest. You feel what you want to feel. It's all good. It's all good. I respect it. I have a difference of opinion. I don't think it's good. I think also, if you're looking for something, when a guy makes a mistake and you already have a negative opinion of him, you're going to say, like, see, that's what I'm talking about. And if you are super high on a guy, you may be more prone to overlook some of those things. I try my best not to do that, but we all fall victim to that at times. For example, Jalen Sneed. I was not very high on Jalen Sneed coming into the year because of a lot of the mistakes he made. So early in the year, he'd make a mistake, and I'm like, see, same old Jalen Smith. Well, over time, you start to realize, like, okay, I'm focusing too much on the mistakes because if he's not actually making more mistakes than other players, it's just my focus on it tends to be more, right? And so when you start to say, okay, take my perception or my view of Jalen Sneed out and just evaluate him for the job he's doing, he's playing a lot better maybe than I gave him credit for. And then also he got better. That's part of it too. He got better. And that's what you want is, Drake Bowen is a outstanding talent who had a very good first season as a starter. That simple as that. Simple as that. So
it's kind of like when people say, like, no offense before they say something. It's like, just say what you have to say. Like, I know I'm not going to like it. Just you don't have to.
I'll say that, like, if I'm being honest, and it's a tick, but the way it was delivered here is more of a, if we're being honest,
sure.
That's not a tick. That's you saying you need to agree with me or you're not being honest. Well, no, we just have a difference of opinion on this. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. So, and I honestly thought, I thought one of them would be jumping in the portal. I did, and they didn't, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah,
because I hope they can keep this group together. Because if they can, it's going to be a fun linebacking core.
100%.
Now, see, this is the proper way to do it. Let's be honest. Brian makes great chili, and I'm going to eat someone with or without him right now from Angela Driscoll. So now that's a proper way of using that phrase. We're almost done. Trevor's about to send the outro, so go ahead and make me a bowl, Ange, and I'll be up in a minute.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us today here on the Irish Breakdown Show.
I made chili last night too, Trev, by the way. So
okay, there we go. Well, we got to let Brian get out of here. He's got some chili to eat, and let's be honest, it sounds really good. But until next time, because Brian and I, we will be back tomorrow at 1:00. We are going to continue to break down this offseason, different moves that the team's making, and where this team could be going and headed to in 2025. But until then, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. and anybody that you know loves Notre Dame football as much as you do. And of course, as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's fantastic content coming out there, intel pieces on recruiting, different campus visitors, film breakdowns, you name it. So make sure that you check us out, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow at 1 p.m., that's Bryan. I'm Trev, and we will see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.